Chapter 170. After cultivating for so long, Chern Zong hadn't taken a good look around the Wind Martial City. It was the same in the ultimate Martial Main City. Now that he had come to the true Martial Main City, his goal wasn't to cultivate. Instead, he walked out of the Grand Wind restaurant and strolled along the wide street. True Martial City was very prosperous. The wide streets were more than 10 meters long, and there were many shops on both sides. There were restaurants, inns, clothing stores, general stores, pawn shops, weapon stores, pill stores, and so on. People came and went, bustling with activity. Chern Zong was amazed. There were many martial artists on the street. When they passed by, Chern Zong could feel a weak inner strength aura. In a place like Wind Martial City, martial artists in the training realm were rare. They were basically the pillars of various forces and were at the level of elders. However, they were very common in true Martial City. On the contrary, there were naturally more martial artists in the Blood Chi realm. As he walked, Chern Zong saw a huge plaque in front of him. There were 4 golden red words written on it. It was as if the sun was hanging in the sky, shining on the earth. Martial Arts Hall. This is the martial arts hall that Brother Murong mentioned. On the way here, Chern Zong and Murong Xiaobai had talked many times. He already had an understanding of true Martial City and was not at a loss. Therefore, he knew about the existence of the Martial Arts Hall. There were similar organizations in the other 4 main cities, such as Ultimate Martial City. However, they were imitating true Martial City's Martial Arts Hall. In terms of level and scale, they were more than a grade lower. It is said that anything can be bought in the Martial Arts Hall, Chern Zong said to himself. The Dingtian Pavilion also claimed that anything could be bought there. However, the nature of the two was different. The Martial Arts Hall was directly under the jurisdiction of True Martial Alliance. There were many stalls inside. Any martial artist could set up a stall to do business as long as they paid enough money. They could also bargain. Chern Zong walked up the 9 steps, crossed the half-meter-high threshold, and walked into the martial arts hall. His first impression was that it was very spacious. It was very spacious, and there were stalls all around. It looked very neat. There were also huge plaques above that were categorized into different sections. For example, there were divisions that sold cultivation methods and martial arts, divisions that sold medicinal herbs and precious medicines, divisions that sold pills, divisions that sold weapons, and divisions that sold all kinds of exotic items, and so on. Chern Zong had 8 million white jade coins with him, which should be a huge sum of money. I've lost the fake frost stream sword. I'm lacking a good sword. I'll go to the weapons section and take a look. Chern Zong muttered to himself as he strode towards the weapons section. In the weapons section, there were dozens of stalls arranged in an orderly manner. There were dozens of stalls. Some stalls sold a lot of weapons, as many as dozens of weapons. There were sabers, spears, swords, and so on, while some stalls sold less than 10 weapons. Moreover, every weapon was at least precious iron grade. When Shifeng thought about it, it made sense. The fees for the stalls in the Martial Trade Hall would not be cheap. If he sold all treasured iron and fine iron weapons here, not only would he not make any profit, he might even lose a large sum of money. Chern Zong walked past every stall as if he was strolling leisurely. His eyes slowly swept across, looking at every weapon, especially the swords. Under normal circumstances, he would only need to buy a precious iron sword. However, since he was here, there was no need to be in a hurry. It was good to take a look. Little brother, come and take a look. The weapons I have here are all of high quality. A middle-aged man saw Chern Zong walk past and immediately shouted out with a face full of smiles. Chern Zong could feel the fluctuations of inner strength from the man's body and couldn't help but be a little stunned. It was a little unbelievable that a chi-refining realm martial artist would be doing business like a commoner. However, after thinking about it, it was reasonable. This was the true Martial City, not a small place like the Martial Wind City. A Qi refining realm martial artist was nothing. If one wanted to establish a foothold, one had to reach the true martial realm. Chernzong also realized that the stall owners here were basically all in the Qi refining realm and Qi refining realm. They were too weak and couldn't even afford to pay for their stalls, nor could they take out anything good to set up their stalls. Moreover, those Qi refining realm martial artists who could afford to pay for their stalls were basically family disciples. It was even more impossible for them to set up their stalls here. Some stall owners would be very enthusiastic, but a small number of stalls were very cold. It was as if they didn't want to buy if they didn't want to. There were even some stall owners who couldn't be bothered to pay attention to you if you took the initiative to buy. People really have all kinds of attitudes, Chernzong thought to himself. He had broadened his horizons. As he walked, he reached the last stall. There was only one weapon on the stall. It was a sword. The moment Chernzong saw the sword, he was attracted to it. At a glance, Chernzong could tell the length and thickness of the sword. As for its weight, he didn't know because he hadn't personally held it. The body of the sword was blue. A halo spread out from it. There were even broken bits of starlight on the sword's body, shining like the stars in the night sky. The sword lay quietly on the sword rack. There was a small wooden sign next to it. The length, thickness, weight, name, and price of the sword were written on it. Star Stream Sword. 50 million. Chernzong was surprised and couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. There weren't many weapons with names. After all, ordinary ironwares, fine ironwares, and precious ironwares wouldn't be named because there were too many of them. Other than precious ironwares, only the imitations of legendary weapons would be given a name. For example, the fake Frost Stream sword from before was obviously an imitation of a legendary weapon. In addition, there was another type of weapon that would have its own name, and that was a god-level weapon. There was a saying that every legendary weapon's predecessor was actually a god-level weapon. In terms of hardness, toughness, and sharpness, etc., it was not inferior to a legendary weapon. The reason why a legendary weapon could be passed down was because its owner had given it an extraordinary experience. Simply put, the first heirloom weapon was famous because of its owner. There was no doubt that the sword with a name that Chernzong was very tempted by was a god-level weapon. 50 million. A bitter smile flashed across Chernzong's face. He thought that the 8 million he carried was a huge sum of money. Compared to it, it was nothing. One had to know that a precious iron sword was only 200,000 to 300,000, but a god-level sword was 50 million. It was a difference of 200 times. Although he was tempted, he was embarrassed and had no choice. In fact, 8 million white jade coins was a huge sum of money for most martial artists in the early stage of the Qi refining realm. Even for martial artists in the middle stage of the Qi refining realm, it was not a small sum. As for 50 million, some martial artists in the true martial realm might not be able to take it out. I'd better go buy a precious iron sword first, Chernzong thought. Thinking back, if he really had 50 million white jade coins, it would not be suitable for him to buy the Starstream sword. After all, its value was extremely high, and his cultivation was not high. He would immediately be targeted and become a fat sheep in the eyes of many martial artists. Spending 300,000 white jade coins, Chernzong bought a top-quality precious iron sword, which was not bad. With the sword in hand, the empty feeling in his heart suddenly disappeared. Let's go to the martial arts division. Compared to the weapon division, there were more stalls in the martial arts division, more than 200, which made it more lively. Maybe I can find a suitable bare-handed martial art, Chernzong thought to himself. If there are top-grade earth-level martial arts and sword arts, I can also buy it. Now, the great immemorial force had been cultivated to the 4th level. If he continued to cultivate, he would reach the peak of the 4th level. Unless he had a breakthrough in his cultivation, it would be difficult to improve the density and purity of his inner strength. In the chi refining realm, the denser and purer one's inner strength was, the stronger one's strength would be. Chen Zong walked past one stall after another. Unfortunately, he did not see any top-grade Earth-level martial arts or martial art. At most, he saw top-grade Earth-level martial arts or martial art. Thinking about it, any top-grade Earth-level martial arts or martial arts were very precious. In a place like the Real Sword Academy, no official disciples except the 7 sword stars were qualified to come in contact with them. Since that was the case, he might as well look for a suitable barehanded martial art. If he practiced a suitable barehanded martial art, his strength would not decrease too much once he lost his sword. Moreover, when he had a sword in his hand, he would be more flexible in battle. After looking around, Chen Zong walked past all the stalls and silently memorized the barehanded martial arts that he liked. Then, he began to choose. Soon, Chen Zong finished choosing and walked to the stall. "I want this manual," Chen Zong said to the stall owner as he pointed at the book in the transparent crystal box. "Okay, 1,700,000, the stall owner said immediately. "Okay." Chen Zong did not bargain. "Wait." A voice came from the side and coldly glanced at Chen Zong. "Don't you understand the principle of first come, first served? I said 1,700,000. If you don't want it, someone else will." The stall owner frowned and said with a cold tone. Previously, this young man had taken a fancy to this Earth-level upper-grade martial art, but he thought it was too expensive and kept bargaining. It was very annoying. Now, someone was willing to buy it for 1,700,000, but he still wanted to stop him. "Boy, I took a fancy to this manual. If you know what's good for you, you'd better get out of here." The young man stared coldly at Chen Zong and said with a threatening tone, 7 million. "Do you want to buy it?" Chen Zong asked in a neither fast nor slow manner. "What does it have to do with you whether I buy it or not?" The young man's tone was very aggressive and his face was unfriendly. Chen Zong ignored him and directly took out 17 purple bills and handed them to the stall owner. The stall owner also took out the manual and handed it to Chen Zong. The transaction was indeed based on the principle of first come, first serve. However, the problem was that this young man still wanted to bargain and was not willing to buy it now. If Chen Zong bought it, it would not be considered breaking the rules. "Good, very good. Boy, you've provoked me." The young man's face was cold and his eyes flashed with a trace of killing intent. His sharp eyes seemed to pierce through Chen Zong as he pointed his finger at him. Immediately, he looked at the stall owner. "And you, remember this. This matter will not be so simple. Get out of here." The stall owner was enraged. His entire body trembled as he emitted a terrifying aura that slammed into the young man's body. His bright eyes contained a hint of anger and a shocking pressure, causing the young man's expression to change greatly. His body trembled as he retreated continuously, as if he was being stared at by a terrifying giant beast. The stall owner was a martial artist in the late stage of the chi refining realm, but it was unknown whether he was in the 7th, 8th, or 9th level. Chapter 171. The Eternal Wind Restaurant was a very famous restaurant in true Martial City. It was well equipped with all kinds of facilities, including training rooms and the like. Training rooms were divided into 3 grades. The lower grade training rooms provided iron poles, the middle grade training rooms provided fine iron poles, and the upper grade training rooms provided precious iron poles. After Chen Zong left the Iwu Hall and returned to the restaurant, he rented an upper grade training room, which cost him 100,000 white jade coins a day. Every inch of land is worth its weight in gold. Chen Zong thought to himself and smiled bitterly. Purchasing a precious iron sword cost 300,000. Purchasing an Earth-level upper-grade loose-hand martial art cost 1,700,000. Purchasing 10 middle-grade strength training pills cost another 1 million. Purchasing 10 middle-grade strength recovery pills cost another 1 million. Purchasing 10 middle-grade strength recovery pills cost another 1 million. Out of 8 million white jade coins, he had spent 4 million. Training pills and rejuvenation pills were both pills for the training realm. They were divided into lower, middle, and upper grades, and it was said that there was also a supreme grade pill. Under normal circumstances, lower-grade training pills and rejuvenation pills were suitable for early-stage training realm martial artists. After all, a martial artist's body had a tolerance level, and taking pills would bring an invisible burden. For example, if most early-stage training realm martial artists took middle-grade training pills or rejuvenation pills, not only would it be useless, but it would also increase the burden on the body and cause damage. Chen Zong was different. He had reached the third stage of the body refining art. Under the copper skin and iron bones, his body was far stronger than other martial artists of the same level. Even if he was compared to a middle-stage training realm martial artist, he would not be any weaker. Moreover, he had reached the peak of the blood qi realm, and his blood qi was pure yang, which was a great advantage. Let me try the effects of middle-grade training pills. Chen Zong thought to himself and took out a middle-grade training pill. If he was in the real sword academy, he would have to spend 20 sword merit points to exchange for a middle-grade training pill. He swallowed one pill, which turned into a warm current and spread out. It followed the path of the great mixed essence force and was quickly refined and transformed, strengthening his inner strength. After more than a year of cultivation, especially after breaking through to the fourth stage of the great mixed essence force, his cultivation was close to the peak of the second transformation of the training realm. The tyrannical primitive inner strength surged within his body, attacking left and right in an attempt to break through the restraints of his bones and muscles. At this moment, it was a test of his body's strength and endurance. Under Chen Zong's tyrannical physique, the strong medicinal power struggled left and right, but it could not break free. It could only be refined and absorbed by the great origin force. An hour later, the power of this middle-grade strength training pill was completely absorbed. A mouthful of white gas shot out like an arrow. My cultivation has finally reached the peak of the second transformation of the force training realm. Next, I'll have to accumulate my strength and break through to the third transformation of the force training realm. Once his cultivation reaches the third cycle of the training realm, his strength will definitely increase significantly. The effect of the middle-grade strength training pill is indeed much better than that of the low-grade strength training pill, at least twice. The remaining 9 middle-grade strength training pills may be enough for me to successfully break through. If it were other martial artists in the initial stage of the force training realm, they might not be able to do it. Firstly, their body's strength was limited and could not withstand the power of the middle-grade strength training realm. Secondly, their body's absorption efficiency was limited. They could not be like Chen Zong's leakless body, which could absorb the power of the pill to the greatest extent and completely remove the impurities. After getting up, Chen Zong first practiced his swordsmanship for a while. Then, he took out the earth-level superior free-hand martial art that he had bought. The Great Thunderclap Hand. The reason why he chose this martial art was that its name and introduction were based on the thunderclap. Chen Zong thought of his Extreme Flash Thunder Slayer. He wanted to see if he could use the Extreme Flash Thunder Slayer as a foundation to better understand the Great Thunderclap Hand. It was an experiment. There were only 3 moves in the Great Thunderclap Hand. The first move was the basic move called the Sudden Appearance of Thunderclap. One could only practice the second move after mastering the first move. Opening the manual, Chen Zong quickly read through it to gain a basic understanding of the Great Thunderclap Hand. Then, he pondered over it word by word and combined it with the mystery of the Extreme Flash Thunder Slayer. It's really useful. After a while, Chen Zong's face lit up. After meditating for a while, he raised his left hand and waved it casually. It seemed like a palm or a knife. It streaked through the air, leaving behind an afterimage, and hit the iron pillar directly. With a bang, the iron pillar shook violently. The place where it was hit was dented by 3 inches. Putting down the manual, Chernzong started to practice with both hands. The great mixed essence force surged endlessly. He practiced again and again. Suddenly, he hit the iron pillar with an even faster speed. Vaguely, there seemed to be a clapping sound. He hit the iron pillar again. This time, the dent was twice as deep. Minor accomplishment. Unknowingly, half a day had passed. His internal force was exhausted. After recovering from the cultivation of the great mixed essence force, it was more stable. After returning to his room, he asked the waiter in the restaurant to bring him hot water to take a bath. He changed into a clean set of clothes and a white sword robe. Murong Xiaobai came to find him. "Brother Chen, I've sent someone to inquire about the Su family." "It will take some time," Murong Xiaobai said with a smile. "Thank you, Brother Murong." Chernzong nodded. "You and I hit it off at first sight. Don't say such things again in the future." Murong Xiaobai shook his head and immediately changed the topic. "Brother Chen, this is your first time in Zhenwu main city. As the host, I'll take you around." "Okay." Chernzong did not refuse. He did not need to pack anything. He directly took his sword and walked out of Chongfeng restaurant. What Murong Xiaobai meant by walking and having fun was actually to take Chernzong to a high-end place to spend money. Dongshao Building. It was known as the most prosperous place in Zhenwu main city. It was also the largest place to squander money. It was a place for many family disciples to have fun. However, from the outside, the Dongshao Building's characteristic was that it was big. Other than that, it looked very simple. However, as soon as he entered, Chernzong was stunned. What was golden and resplendent? What was luxurious and rich? Chandeliers made of crystals surrounded the place. It looked magnificent. Dark red wood decorated the place. The floor was paved with white jade. It was very comfortable to step on. It gave people the feeling that they were stepping on clouds. Just the decorations alone were enough to make Chernzong feel dizzy. He was born in Little Lake Town. Even when he entered Fengwu City, he spent all his time and energy on cultivation. When had he ever seen such a scene? "Brother Chen, are you stunned?" Murong Xiaobai smiled. When he first came, he was also like this. At this moment, a fragrant wind blew. It was not strong and suffocating, but it was not weak and difficult to smell. It was faintly discernible and silent. It smelled very good. It smelled like orchids and daffodils. In short, it seemed to be changing all the time. There were thousands of scents. "Young Master Murong." A delicate voice sounded, making Chernzong's whole body tremble. What a charming feeling. "Huanyang, this is Chernzong. He is my good friend. Arrange a good one for him." Murong Xiaobai could tell at a glance that he was a veteran and often came here. "Oh, it's young Master Chen. Nice to meet you." The Huanyang, who was dressed in a pink gauze, smiled and bowed. "I will arrange a few for young Master Chen. Young Master Chen can see which one he is satisfied with." "No need," Chernzong quickly said. He understood what she meant. Although he would not feel uncomfortable in such a place, Chernzong was not used to it. "Huanyang, since Brother Chen is not willing, then there is no need." Murong Xiaobai smiled. After interacting with Chernzong for a few days, she could see that Chernzong was a very strong-willed person. "Well, I wonder what young Master Murong and young Master Chen want to play." The Huanyang smiled. "Martial arts." Murong Xiaobai smiled and immediately looked at Chernzong. "Brother Chen, martial arts is a major feature of Dongshao Building. It is not bad to go and have a look. Brother Murong, you can decide." Chernzong said. He had never been to such a place. How would he know what to play? The guest should follow the host's decision. There was a separate hall in the martial arts hall. After entering, Chernzong heard the sound of fists and feet colliding. At first glance, he saw 2 scantily dressed beauties in the middle of the hall. One of them was wearing a blue hollowed-out martial arts suit, and the other was wearing a red hollowed-out martial arts suit. Only the important parts were covered. The middle was concave and the sides were protruding. They were separated by a dark red copper hollowed-out screen, forming independent small rooms that did not interfere with each other. There were a total of 10 small rooms. 7 of them were occupied, and the remaining 3 were empty. Suddenly, a sharp gaze fell on Chenzong's face. Chenzong also looked over. It turned out to be the young man who had threatened him in the martial arts hall. When this person saw Chenzong, a sneer hung on the corner of his mouth. His eyes were sharp, and he immediately said something to a finely dressed young man sitting next to him. The finely dressed young man also looked over. His lazy gaze suddenly became sharp, as if a long knife had been unsheathed and wanted to pierce Chenzong. Chenzong's eyes were sharp, and he looked at him without fear. "Brother Chen, do you have a conflict with Xinling?" Murong Xiaobai saw this scene and asked aloud. "I have never seen him, but the person next to him, not long ago in the martial arts hall." Chenzong explained the matter in concise words. "I see." Murong Xiaobai's mouth hung a sneer. Not to mention that she was not on his side. Even if she was on his side, so what? The two sat down directly in the empty small room, which happened to be opposite Xinling's room. At this time, the middle fight ended, and the beauty in the red hollowed-out martial arts uniform won. "Murong Xiaobai, do you dare to play with me?" Xinling's gaze became lazy again, and his tone was lazy and weak. However, Chenzong would not be confused. This Xinling looked less than 20 years old, but he was a martial artist in the qi refining realm. Not only was he in the qi refining realm, but he was in the qi refining realm. Like Murong Xiaobai, his cultivation was also in the qi refining realm. These children from the families in the Zhenwu main city could not be underestimated. "Xinling, if you want to play, I will take it." Murong Xiaobai had a baby face, but he was very domineering. "Good, you are indeed young Master Murong. You are straightforward enough." Xinling clapped his hands again and again. "Let's bet on the outcome of the next fight. Let's play 5 million first." At this time, another 2 beautiful martial artists in hollowed-out martial arts uniforms walked into the middle of the fighting arena. They were a few meters apart, and the fight had not started yet because no bets had been placed. Chapter 172. Murong Xiaobai bet that the red team would win, and Xinling bet that the blue team would win. Whoever won would get 5 million white jade coins. Chenzong couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly. He thought that 8 million was a huge sum of money, but he suffered another blow. Look at this kind of young master from an aristocratic family. He bet 5 million. Others also bet one after another, at least 1 million. After the betting, the martial arts fight also began. Both female martial artists were very beautiful and had good figures. Under the hollowed-out martial arts clothes, there was a kind of temptation. Chenzong didn't dare to look at them at first. For him who was only 19 years old, and had not experienced the relationship between a man and a woman, there was an indescribable feeling. His heart and body seemed to be restless. His pure yang qi and blood also accelerated because of this. His whole body began to heat up, and his breathing became rapid unconsciously. Even his body had a reaction. It seems that Brother Chen is still a fledgling. Murong Xiaobai laughed secretly. Although he had a baby face and had never lost his virginity, he had been trained, which was different from Chenzong. As time passed, Murong Xiaobai suddenly found that Chenzong's breathing became stable, and his whole person became calm and focused. After careful observation, she found that Chenzong was watching the battle between the 2 beautiful martial artists. His attention seemed to be on the skills and martial arts of both sides. Yes, after the initial discomfort, Chenzong's attention shifted to the battle between the 2 beautiful martial artists. The battle between the 2 female martial artists could be said to be pleasing to the eye. They should have been specially trained. While it was beautiful, it was also practical. Every move was aimed at knocking down the opponent. Chen Zong put himself in their shoes. If he were to fight with them, how could he resolve their attacks and how could he make an effective counterattack? Brother Chen is really a martial arts fanatic. Murong Xiaobai secretly praised. Young masters from aristocratic families like them would receive training in beauty when they reached a certain age. From this, they would develop resistance, so that they could maintain enough rationality when they were tempted and not be harmed. Murong Xiaobai was also sure that Chen Zong had never received training in this area. After all, as long as the young masters of large clans were not ignorant and incompetent people, they would have good eyesight. They could roughly tell a person's background from their actions and speech. It was a fact that Chen Zong's family background was very low, and he had never tried to hide it. Of course, this kind of thing would gradually be hidden with cultivation and experience, but now Chen Zong was still very young. For a young man with a humble background, who had never received any training in the art of seduction, to be able to quickly shake off the seduction and focus on combat techniques, it could only be said that this person's martial heart was incomparably strong, and his willpower was also incomparably shocking. For such a person, as long as he didn't die, even if his talent was average, he would still be able to achieve great things in the future. It was right for him to befriend him. If Chen Zong knew that so many thoughts flashed through Murong Xiaobai's mind in such a short period of time, he would definitely be very surprised. Then, he would lament that the young master of a big family had a different mind. At the end of the battle, the red team was defeated by the blue team due to a careless move. This meant that Murong Xiaobai would lose 5 million white jade coins to Xinling. Thank you, young master Murong, for the 5 million. Xinling said lazily, but Chen Zong could hear a trace of pride in his words. Murong Xiaobai's expression remained unchanged. She took out the 5 million purple money note, and it was sent to Xinling's hand. Young Master Murong, do you dare to play with me again? Xinling spoke again. Okay, let's play 10 million for this round. Murong Xiaobai said directly. 10 million. Chen Zong was suddenly shocked, and the people in the other small private rooms were also shocked. In fact, they were not as bad as Chen Zong imagined. 5 million was not a small sum of money. 10 million was a real big sum of money, and it was not easy to take it out. It was rare to see people who came here to play martial arts and bet 5 million. As for 10 million, it was even rarer. Xinling's lazy gaze was also dignified. Young Master Xin doesn't dare. Murong Xiaobai's tone was flat. In this world, there is nothing that I don't dare to do. 10 million it is. The dignified look in Xinling's eyes dissipated, and a chuckle hung at the corner of his mouth. This time, it was still the beautiful martial artist. Murong Xiaobai still bet on the red team to win, and Xinling bet on the blue team to win. Compared with the previous pair of beautiful female martial artists, this pair of beautiful female martial artists' appearance, figure, and fighting style were different. Chen Zong once again ignored their beautiful and seductive bodies and focused on their battle, making assumptions about himself. Brother Chen, who do you think will win this time? Murong Xiaobai asked casually. It should be the red team. A few seconds later, Chen Zong responded. The battle was fierce and white-hot. Suddenly, the blue team seized the opportunity and hit the red team's abdomen with a palm. Young Master Murong, I will gladly accept the 10 million. This scene made Xinling's side excited. 10 million white jade money was not a small amount. There was a sudden change. The moment the red team was hit in the abdomen, he inhaled inwardly to minimize the injury. At the same time, he punched the blue team's head directly. With a bang, the blue team's head shook violently. Blood flowed from his mouth and nose. He staggered back and fell to the ground. Young Master Xin, I will gladly accept the 10 million. Murong Xiaobai said with a smile on his face. Xinling's face was livid. He could afford to lose 10 million. The key was that he had just opened his mouth and the situation had suddenly reversed. Murong Xiaobai had even used his original words. It was like a slap on his face. It was burning hot. Murong Xiaobai, do you dare to play a big game with me? Xinling's lazy voice had a trace of coldness. His gaze also swept past Chenzong. How do you want to play? Tell me, I will accept it. Murong Xiaobai said very domineeringly. Good, young Master Murong is really heroic. Xinling clapped his hands and smiled. For this game, you and I will each send one person to enter the battle arena. The bet will be 30 million. 30 million. Chenzong had a feeling of numbness in his scalp. He wanted to rob, if possible. I accept 30 million, but change the way, Murong Xiaobai said coldly. Young Master Murong is not as heroic as I thought. Xinling smiled coldly. You said it so loudly just now. Now you want to slap your own face? I will fight you. Do you dare? If you don't, get out of here now. The young man who had threatened Chenzong stood up directly and pointed at Chenzong. His face was full of provocation. Brother Chen, don't agree. You have a share. Murong Xiaobai said. Brother Murong, the other party has the intention of coming for me. Chenzong said, if they want to fight, then let's fight. Chenzong could feel the fluctuation of the breath of Xinling and the others. They were all in the early stage of the qi refining realm. 2 of them were in the 2nd stage and the other 2 were in the 3rd stage. This young man was in the 3rd stage of the qi refining realm. Since you want to fight, I will also bet 4 million on myself. Do you dare to accept? Chenzong stood up and said calmly. Since you want to give me money, why wouldn't I dare? Hearing this, the young man suddenly sneered. He jumped over the dark red copper screen and landed on the battle arena. Brother Chen, be careful. Murong Xiaobai said. Chenzong nodded and jumped lightly. He landed lightly and was a few meters away from the young man. Take my punch. The young man exhaled and shouted. His voice was like rolling thunder, and his momentum was amazing. At the same time, he clenched his fist and punched out fiercely. It was as if the air was shattered, and he bombarded Chenzong with a terrible force. This punch was driven by a swift and violent internal force. It was as powerful as thunder and was incomparably tyrannical. As soon as he attacked, he directly used the unique skill of the upper earth level martial art. It was obvious that he was determined to defeat Chenzong with one punch. Murong Xiaobai's expression changed slightly. He was not clear about Chenzong's cultivation and strength. When Chenzong had not cultivated the Great Origin Force to the 4th level and his cultivation was still at the late stage of the 2nd transformation of the Qi refining realm, his strength was superior to most of the martial artists at the 3rd transformation of the Qi refining realm. Only those who were at the top of the Iron Sword list could force him to show his true strength. Now, the Great Origin Force had broken through to the 4th level and his cultivation had reached the late stage of the 2nd transformation of the Qi refining realm. Whether it was the strength or the purity of his internal force, it was obvious that his strength was stronger. With his current strength, Chenzong was confident that he could defeat Xiaobang without using the 3-in-1 technique. Although the young man's attack was strong, it felt inferior to Xiaobang. However, Chenzong would not underestimate his opponent because of this. A lion would use all its strength to catch a rabbit. He did not need to use all his strength, but he had to be vigilant enough to prevent any changes. He did not draw his sword. Instead, his right hand seemed to be clenched into a fist, but also like a palm knife. He casually struck out. Immediately, there was a crackling sound like an electric arc. The first move of the great thunderclap hand, thunderclap surprise. Chenzong had just learned it and used it against his opponent. The fist and the hand collided in an instant. The air rippled and the tyrannical force impacted both sides. Chenzong's body shook slightly and immediately stopped. Then, he struck out another move, thunderclap surprise. On the other hand, the young man's body shook, and he had to take a step back to reduce the force. Seeing that Chen Zong was about to strike again, the young man raised his left hand and turned it into a palm. He fiercely slapped out, and his internal force exploded. There was a majestic momentum like the surging waves. This was another ultimate move of the upper earth-level martial art. Another collision. Just like the first time, the young man had to take a step back again. Chen Zong took a step forward and used thunderclap surprise again. The second transformation of the Qi refining realm. Where did this person come from? He is only at the second transformation of the Qi refining realm, but he has such strength. They were all surprised. Murong Xiaobai smiled. On the other hand, Shun Ling frowned and his face was not looking good. Damn it. The young man's face was gloomy, but his heart was very shocked. He thought that with his strength, he would be able to defeat his opponent. He did not expect that he would be defeated again and again. Every palm of his opponent contained a very terrifying power. It was very powerful and vigorous, like a thunderclap. Under the head-on collision, his fists and palms felt numb. No, he had to use all his strength to defeat his opponent. Otherwise, if this continued, his disadvantage would only become more obvious. He took a deep breath and his internal force exploded. He clenched his right fist and struck out fiercely. He directly used his killer move. Chapter 173. The sound of the violent collision was like the beating of a drum. Chen Zong's figure swayed and he stepped back step by step to dissipate the force. The young man directly slid backward, the soles of his shoes and the ground violently rubbed against each other. His right fist's 5 fingers were bent, and a mouthful of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. The killing move, Thunder Breaking Mountains, was indeed very powerful, but it was only at the entry level. On the other hand, Chen Zong had cultivated the great primordial force to the 4th level. The purity of his inner strength was completely superior to his opponent's, and the power was more tyrannical. The 3rd level of the body forging technique gave the body more amazing strength. In addition, at the critical moment, the thunderbolt had broken through to the realm of Dishang, and the power had increased again. The most important thing was that Chen Zong saw through the flaws in the opponent's thunder-breaking mountains and seized the opportunity to gain the upper hand and injure his opponent. "I haven't lost yet!" The young man roared and attacked again. Chen Zong struck again and repelled his opponent again. This time, the injury could not be suppressed, and blood spurted out directly. "Young Master Shin, I'll kindly accept your 30 million. Murong Xiaobai couldn't stop laughing. She couldn't be unhappy. That was 30 million white jade coins. Even if she was the young master of the Murong family, it wouldn't be so easy to take it out. She believed that Shen Ling would bleed a lot in such a short time. "I don't have so much money on me. I'll give you 10 million first, and the remaining 20 million will be given to you later." Shen Ling's face was livid. "Yes, young Master Shin, please make a written agreement, lest you go back on your words," Murong Xiaobai said with a smile. "Okay." Shen Ling's eyes were sharp as if he wanted to pierce through Murong Xiaobai, but he had to agree. 4 million, give it to me." Chen Zong was more direct. "I don't have so much money, but I can make a written agreement for you," the young man quickly said, secretly hating. "I don't know you. Even if I make a written agreement, what if you go back on your words?" Chen Zong said calmly. It's just 4 million, how can I go back on my words?" The young man was angry. "Just 4 million, then give it to me." Chen Zong's expression did not change, and his tone was flat. "You." The young man's eyes were as if he wanted to eat Chen Zong. He immediately took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. "I have 2 million in cash, I'll give it to you first. This pearl as a substitute for the other 2 million. As he spoke, the young man took out a round bead the size of a thumbnail. It was bronze in color and looked very textured. "This pearl was left behind during the era of my kingdom. Someone once offered 2.5 million for it, but I didn't sell it. Now I'll give it to you as collateral for 2 million, but I'll redeem it later, the young man said. It's ridiculous for a broken pearl to be worth 2 million. Murong Xiaobai sneered. Broken bead. What a joke. Wearing this bead can strengthen one's muscles and bones. It can also help recover one's physical strength, the young man retorted. However, he did not dare to be too aggressive. After all, his status was not as high as Murong Xiaobai's. Let me take a look, Chen Zong said. He reached out and took the so-called pearl. It felt heavy in his hand. He was a little surprised. The pearl looked small, but it weighed more than 10 pounds. He estimated it to be about 15 pounds. Then, Chen Zong felt a trace of aura coming from the bronze pearl. The aura spread from his palm to his arm, and gradually spread to every part of his body. The aura was being absorbed by his body bit by bit. Chen Zong felt it carefully. He could vaguely feel that the pearl seemed to be helpful to his body forging technique. It can indeed strengthen the muscles and bones and restore physical strength, but it's very weak. It's good for Qi and Blood Realm martial artists, but it's useless for Qi refining realm martial artists, Chen Zong said bluntly. The young man's expression changed. That was true. But it's good to give it to my younger brother and sister. Okay, I'll take it for 2 million. Take good care of it. I'll redeem it, the young man said. Chen Zong didn't say anything. If it was really helpful to his body forging technique, how could he let the other party redeem it? Let's go, Shen Ling coldly said. His ice-cold gaze was like a blade as it swept across Chen Zong's face. Brother Chen, you have to be careful during this time. Shen Ling is narrow-minded, Murong Xiaobai said. Chen Zong nodded. Shen Ling's last look before he left was indeed full of threats. But you can rest assured that he won't dare to target you directly in the Zhenwu main city, Murong Xiaobai added. Murong Xiaobai added. The Zhenwu main city was the headquarters of the Real Martial Arts Alliance. Whether it was the law or public security, it was very perfect. No one would dare to cause trouble here. Moreover, he was the young master of the Murong family. He could protect Chen Zong, but if he left the Zhenwu main city, it would be hard to say. But since it had come to this, it was useless to say more. He could only be more vigilant. Murong Xiaobai intended to take Chen Zong to play more, but Chen Zong was eager to try whether the pearl was really helpful to his body forging technique practice. So, he proposed to leave and return to the Changfeng restaurant. Entering the practice room again, Chen Zong put the pearl close to his body and immediately displayed the first move of the body forging technique. After carefully feeling it, he immediately practiced it. The body forging technique could be divided into 4 levels: copper skin, steel bar, iron bone, and mixed yuan body. However, the body forging technique itself only had the first 3 levels. There was no specific information about the 4th level, mixed yuan body. Chen Zong didn't know where to start and felt helpless. After several attempts, Chen Zong found a way, which was to constantly practice the first 3 levels of the body forging technique until the quantitative change produced a qualitative change. Then, when the conditions were right, he would naturally break through to the 4th level and practice mixed yuan body. However, it was not clear whether it was feasible or not. It was even more unclear when he could practice it. Soon, Chen Zong practiced the 9 forms of the body forging technique. It's really effective. Chen Zong's eyes shone with excitement. The copper pearl constantly emitted a unique aura. When the aura came into contact with the skin, it would enter the body and spread to every part of the body. However, the speed was very slow, and the effect of strengthening the muscles and bones was also very weak. Just as Chen Zong said before, it had a good effect on Qi and Blood Realm martial artists, but the effect on Qi refining realm martial artists was minimal. However, when he practiced the 9 forms of the body forging technique, the aura emitted from the copper pearl was at least 10 times stronger. 10 times. For a martial artist in the Qi refining realm, this was a pretty good result. However, when the body forging technique ended, the aura returned to its original level. He continued to practice. Chen Zong practiced the body forging technique 10 times in a row. The aura emitted from the copper pearl was like an endless stream of water, constantly flowing into his body and spreading to his limbs and bones. It was absorbed by his physique and strengthened little by little. Chen Zong could also feel that his body was heating up from the inside. His skin, muscles, tendons, and bones seemed to be fusing under this heat. Mixed Yuan body. Mixed Yuan body. Could it be that the fourth level of the body forging technique, the mixed Yuan body, is the result of the first 3 levels of the body forging technique? This was one of Chen Zong's many guesses before, but he was not sure because he had not confirmed it. However, with the help of the copper pearl, he felt that this guess was most likely true. Literally, the mixed Yuan body was indeed so. Mixed Yuan body was one body. Now that he tried it, it was indeed so. For a moment, Chen Zong was full of motivation. After mastering the first 3 grades of the body forging technique, his physique was no less than that of a martial artist in the middle stage of the force training stage. In fact, his physique might even surpass that of a martial artist in the middle stage of the force training stage. If he could master the 4th grade, he would definitely become even stronger. Perhaps, his physique would be comparable to that of a martial artist in the later stage of the force training stage. It should be known that the stronger a martial artist's physique was, the stronger his endurance and defense would be, which meant that his survival ability would be increased linearly. This pearl, let's call it the mixed Yuan pearl. Chen Zong directly gave it a name, which meant that this pearl was his. As for the young man's so-called redemption, how could that be possible? Dispelling distracting thoughts, he continued to practice the body forging technique. The aura that was 10 times stronger permeated every part of his body. After another 20 rounds, Chen Zong felt as if he was about to burn up. Every part of his body felt as if it was about to melt. I've reached my limit. I'll practice again tomorrow. After resting for a while and his body cooled down, he took out a middle-grade Qi refining pill and took it to practice the great mixed Yuan force. His cultivation was still at the peak of the 2nd level of the Qi refining realm, but it was more stable. Then, Chen Zong began to practice the swordsmanship and the great thunderclap hand. When he left the practice room, Chen Zong felt that he was being watched. It was very direct and there was no intention to hide it. Is it Xin Ling's people? Chen Zong secretly thought that it should be. Surveillance was fine. The only thing he could do now was to improve his cultivation and strength as much as possible. For several days, Chen Zong went to the practice room. First, he practiced the body forging technique 30 times, then he practiced the great mixed Yuan force, the swordsmanship, the great thunderclap hand, and other martial arts. He also further comprehended the 3-in-1 martial arts realm and excavated the potential in it, so that he could make progress little by little. With the support of the primal chaos orb, Chen Zong's cultivation of the body tempering technique was unexpectedly good. In just 3 days, Chen Zong felt that the strength of his physique had increased again. Today, I'll try to refine 2 middle-grade Qi refining pills. Chen Zong secretly thought. He directly took out 2 middle-grade Qi refining pills and took them. Suddenly, the medicinal power doubled and raged in his body, as if it wanted to break through his bones and muscles and cause damage. However, under the stronger bones and muscles, it was still restrained. However, Chen Zong could feel that this was the limit. If the medicinal power was stronger, it would be difficult to restrain it. Great mixed Yuan force. Refine. He fully activated the cultivation method, and the vigorous and upright internal force shuttled between his bones and muscles. It quickly refined and absorbed the original internal force produced by the 2 middle-grade Qi refining pills and continued to grow. When the last trace of original internal force was completely refined and absorbed, Chen Zong could feel that the internal force in his body was turbulent, like the tide rising wave after wave, and was about to break through to a new height. I'm about to break through. Chen Zong was secretly happy and quickly operated the cultivation method with all his strength. Chapter 174. I've finally reached the third turn of the Qi refining realm. Chen Zong smiled as he felt the powerful inner strength in his body. He had broken through from the peak of the second turn of the Qi refining realm to the early stage of the third turn of the Qi refining realm. After stabilizing, the quantity and purity of inner strength had doubled, which meant that the power had become more powerful. He had broken through to the fourth stage of the great primordial force, mastered the killing move of the heavenly light sword technique, obtained the primordial orb, and now his cultivation had broken through to the third turn of the Qi refining realm. He had gained a lot from this trip. Of course, it was also a trip between life and death. Then, there was another piece of good news. There was news about the Su family. Brother Chen, you know that if a force wants to establish itself in the main city, it must have a true martial realm expert. Otherwise, it needs to rely on other forces with true martial realm experts. Murong Xiaobai said, the Su family used to have true martial realm experts, and more than one. The most powerful one was the dragon-slaying spiritual master, Su Jingji. At that time, the Su family was not much worse than the Murong family. However, after the disappearance of the dragon-slaying spiritual master, the other true martial realm experts of the Su family were injured or killed one after another. The top power of the entire family was weakened again and again until the last true martial realm expert was seriously injured and could not recover. At that time, the Su family's most promising genius, Su Beiwang, was injured and his cultivation was destroyed. This blow was very heavy for the Su family. There was no hope for them to recover. The Su family's property was gradually taken over by others. In the end, they had to leave the main city of Zhenwu. Now, I heard that they are living in Jiaoniu town under the jurisdiction of the Black Martial City. Chen Zong listened quietly. The Su family's experience was really bumpy. I don't know why Brother Chen is inquiring about the Su family, but I have a piece of advice. It's best not to have anything to do with the Su family. Otherwise, it will cause unnecessary trouble. Murong Xiaobai's tone was serious. She took a deep breath and solemnly emphasized, big trouble. What kind of trouble? Chen Zong's heart sank slightly. His intuition told him that it would be more difficult to fulfill the dragon-slaying spiritual master's last wish. Do you know who crippled Su Beiwang? Murong Xiaobai asked. She knew that Chen Zong didn't know, so she continued. Su Beiwang used to be a member of the genius training camp. It's said that he had many conflicts with someone in the training camp, but he always had the upper hand. However, no one knew that many years later, that person would become the Dragon General of the Overlord Alliance. His strength would become extremely powerful, and he could be said to be invincible in the Qi refining stage. The grudge from that year was thus resolved. Su Beiwang was injured and his cultivation was crippled. Chen Zong couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. Why did he have to find the Su clan and then involve the Tyrant Martial Alliance? Martial true martial realm. Warriors. Generals. As Murong Xiaobai continued, Chen Zong frowned. The Tyrant Martial League had a clear hierarchy. This kind of power was either funny or scary, just like the Black Demon Sect. Of course, compared to an eagle like the Black Demon Sect, the Tyrant Martial League was like a tiny sparrow. However, it had all the essentials, especially since its founder was the Tyrant Martial League's Heaven's Pride. This kind of genius with shocking potential had also recruited many geniuses from the genius training camp. It continued to grow and develop. Sooner or later, it would become a giant. I heard that General Long is a narrow-minded person. Because of him, the Su family can only stay in Jianyo town and can't rise again. Brother Chen, if you get involved with the Su family, I'm afraid. Murong Xiaobai's voice was full of worry. It's okay. I was just asked to give something to the Su family. That's all, Chen Zong said with a smile. But was that really the case? He didn't know. Chen Zong didn't know. No matter what, it was his principle to do what he was asked to do. Brother Murong, thank you for saving my life. If there's anything you need in the future, I'll do my best. Since there's already news of the Su family, I'll take my leave first, Chen Zong said resolutely. As for being watched, so what? He couldn't just hide in the Zhenwu main city because he was being watched. Shen Ling has been sending people to watch you. Brother Chen, you don't have to worry about this. I'll send people to interfere with their vision so that Brother Chen can escape easily, Murong Xiaobai said. Since you've decided to leave, there's no time to lose. Let's go now. He left as soon as he said so, leaving less time for Shen Ling's people to react. With Murong Xiaobai's help, Chen Zong didn't leave the Zhenwu main city from the main gate, so Shen Ling's people didn't have time to follow him. Damn it! Shen Ling was furious, and his eyes were cold. Young master, in recent days, Murong Xiaobai has been collecting information about the Su family. All signs indicate that the person who really wants information about the Su family is Chen Zong, a middle-aged scholar said confidently. His eyes flashed and he pinched his goatee. What do you want to say? Shen Ling asked. Young master, have you forgotten how the Su family declined in the past? How they were forced to leave the Zhenwu main city? How they were forced to be trapped in the Jianyo town? The middle-aged scholar asked. Although this information was hidden, as long as one was willing to investigate, they could still find it. You mean? Shen Ling was stunned at first, and then he smiled. Yes, as long as this news is passed to Longjiang. The middle-aged scholar laughed like a weasel who had stolen a chicken. No, send people to the Jianyo town. If this person really wants to find the Su family, they will definitely go to the Jianyo town, capture him alive, and hand him over to Longjiang. Shen Ling smiled. Young master is wise. The middle-aged scholar's eyes lit up. Riding the wind and treading on the water, his body was light as he ran through the forest. Chen Zong's cultivation base was at the beginning of the third cycle of the training stage and the fourth stage of the mixed Yuan force. Regardless of whether it was the density or purity of his inner strength, it far exceeded that of an ordinary third cycle of the training stage. Even when compared to a fourth cycle of the training stage, he was not inferior. With such a cultivation, the distance of each step increased to 20 meters, and it was unbelievably light. With a light tap of his toes, it was as if he was going to fly with the wind. His speed was extremely fast. Black Martial City was one of the 43 martial cities under the jurisdiction of the Zhenwu main city. It was located in a relatively remote place, and it would take 10 days to get there on a red horse. However, Chen Zong's speed was much faster than the red horse, and he was even faster by crossing the mountains. In front of him was a river that was a few hundred meters wide. The river was slow and trickling. Chen Zong did not stop for a moment, and he still used riding the wind and treading on the water. He tapped his toes on the water, and a force stopped the river in an instant. Layers of ripples spread out, and it started flowing again in the blink of an eye. In just a few seconds, Chen Zong had crossed the river that was a few hundred meters wide. Only the tips of his shoes were slightly wet, and as for his strength, it did not consume much. In less than 2 days, Chen Zong saw a statue of a stone cow with long curved horns in front of him. The statue looked a little rough, and there were 3 big red words, Jianyo Town, written on the body of the stone cow. Here we are. Chen Zong smiled, exhaled, and strode into Jianyo Town. Chen Zong easily found out the location of the Su family, which was located in the north of Jianyo Town. Striding forward, Chen Zong saw a big house painted in red. There was a plaque above the gate that said Su family. Chunzong clearly saw that the walls of the Su family's house were damaged in many places, and even the gate was damaged. Some of the marks were still very new. The gate of the Su family was tightly shut. Chunzong knocked on the gate. "Who is it?" A stern voice came from inside, and the tone was unfriendly. "A guest," Chunzong answered naturally. The gate opened, and there were a few martial artists at the door. They all stared at Chunzong with unfriendly gazes. Their gazes were as cold as knives, as if they wanted to cut Chunzong into pieces. Immediately, their gazes were filled with suspicion. "Who are you? Tell us your name and identity, or don't blame us for being rude," the Su family members shouted sternly. Chunzong realized that the Su family members in front of him were only at the 9th level of the Qi and Blood realm. The Chun family of Little Lake Town did not have a single person at the 9th level of the Qi and Blood realm. Yes, before his father recovered his cultivation, the Su family could already be considered one of the major forces in Little Lake Town. The Su family had a few martial artists at the 9th level of the Qi and Blood realm as soon as they appeared, which was indeed extraordinary. However, compared to his predecessor, the Su family used to be a big and famous family in Zhenwu main city. Now they had declined to such a state and were relying on martial artists at the Qi and Blood realm to prop up the family. It was indeed a tragedy. Moreover, all signs indicated that the Su family was not having an easy time. "Die, you evil thief!" Suddenly, a figure leaped out from behind a few Blood Qi realm martial artists of the Su family. He kicked fiercely with a powerful whistle and terrifying wind pressure. It was like a dragon breaking out of the water, attacking fiercely. The power of this kick was so strong that it was enough to kill an ordinary martial artist at the 9th level of the Qi and Blood realm. However, Chunzong could clearly feel that the person's aura was only at the 8th level of the Qi and Blood realm. The powerful kick was nothing to Chunzong. If he wanted to, he could easily take the person's life with a finger. However, Chunzong was not here to kill. With a casual wave of his hand, he sent the person who attacked flying. The pupils of the Su family martial artists at the 9th level of the Qi and Blood realm narrowed. A casual wave of his hand was terrifying. Could he be a martial artist at the Qi refining realm? "Who are you?" the leader asked in a low voice, his face full of vigilance. "I don't mean any harm. You don't have to be like this," Chunzong said. It was better to clarify the Su family's situation before explaining his intentions. The person who was casually sent flying by Chunzong stood up. His eyes were fierce and he clenched his fists. If he was not a match for him, he would have charged forward. Chunzong also saw that this person was very young. He looked to be about 14 or 15 years old. "Invite the guest in." An old voice came from inside. The Su family martial artists' expressions eased, and they made way for Chunzong to enter. Chapter 175. The old man's name was Su Yuenda, the current head of the Su family. Chunzong's sharp senses told him that the old man's qi and blood were deteriorating. He gave off a dejected aura, as if he didn't have many years left to live. "I was entrusted by an elder of the Su family," Chunzong said simply. Su Yuenda's eyes lit up, but then he thought of something and his eyes dimmed. "As you can see, my young friend, the Su family is in decline. We don't even have a single warrior in the Qi refining realm," Su Yuenda said. His voice was old and his aura was weak. "Why is that?" Chunzong was shocked. The Su family used to be a big family in the Zhenwu main city. Such a family would be one of the top families in the Jiwu main city. It had only been 6 years since they left, but they didn't even have a single warrior in the Qi refining realm. This was unbelievable. Someone is deliberately targeting the Su family. As soon as a warrior in the Qi refining realm appears in the Su family, he will be killed immediately, Su Yuenda said. His old voice was full of hatred and helplessness. Long Jiang. Chen Zong asked subconsciously. So you know something? Su Yuenda was startled at first, then he sighed. It's him. Chen Zong frowned slightly. This Long Jiang was a little too ruthless. He had crippled the Su family's hope, Su Beiwang. He had even chased the Su family out of true martial main city and trapped them in Horned Ox Town. Now, he wanted to cut off all hope of the Su family rising. Long Jiang is very powerful. He is invincible in the Qi refining realm. He is only one step away from the real force realm. Su Yuanda shook his head. He is narrow-minded and bears a grudge against my Su family's Su Beiwang. He also bears a grudge against my Su family's dragon-subduing legacy. He believes that this is a taboo. Anyone who is related to my Su family, be it a force or an individual, will be implicated unless they are strong enough to make him fear them. Young friend, I don't know who you are, nor do I know which Su family entrusted you. But I advise you to leave the Su family now. Otherwise, you will be implicated, Su Yuenda said quickly. Chen Zong lowered his voice and said, The person who entrusted me with this task is called Dragon-Slaying Immortal. Su Yuenda stared at Chen Zong with his mouth agape and eyes wide open. His face was full of horror. Those 4 words were like thunder exploding in his ears, turning the world upside down. Uncle Jingji Su Yuenda was 60 years old this year. The year he was born was the year Su Jingji left. It could be said that Su Yuenda's generation grew up listening to Su Jingji's glorious deeds. There was only one thing in their hearts that they respected, and that was Su Jingji. Su Jingji, the dragon-slaying immortal, was the reason why the Su family rose to prominence and became a famous family in the true martial main city, but he was also the reason why the Su family eventually declined. Breathing rapidly, Su Yuenda's expression kept changing as a fierce battle raged in his heart. Chen Zong had been staring at Su Yuenda the whole time, noticing every subtle change in his facial expression. Su Yuenda's forehead was covered in sweat. His entire face had turned pale, and he looked very weak. After a long while, Su Yuenda exhaled and sat down, unable to support himself. His breathing had become even weaker. Little friend, I don't care if what you said is true or false. Leave now. Unless you have the strength to contend with the Overlord League, don't say anything else. Su Yuenda lowered his head and waved his hand. He sounded very tired as he said, Also, don't say anything like this again. Otherwise, it will only invite disaster and even implicate your family. Okay. Chen Zong was silent for a few seconds before he nodded his head. Indeed, the Su family's current situation was completely out of Su Jingji's expectations. It was also completely out of Chen Zong's expectations. At the end of the day, he was still just a martial artist who had completed the 3rd refinement stage. No matter how talented he was, it was still unknown whether he could contend with someone who had completed the 4th refinement stage, let alone the invincible Long Jiang. Behind Long Jiang was the entire Overlord League. The leader of the Overlord League, the Overlord Prodigy, was the head of the true martial alliance. All these implications were like a giant tree. In comparison, Chen Zong was just a small blade of grass. His ordinary background meant that he didn't have a strong enough backer. If he wasn't careful, he could very well implicate his family. According to Su Yuenda, someone as narrow-minded as Long Jiang wouldn't do such a thing. Leaving now was the best option. Not only could he protect himself, but he could also protect his family. In addition, Chen Zong had another concern. The Su family had already declined to such a state. Would they be able to preserve the legacy of the Dragon Slayer if he returned it to them? It would be very difficult. It would even bring about an absolute disaster for the Su family. They would be completely wiped out. As for now, even though they had declined to such a state, they were still alive. Being alive meant that there was still hope. Leaving now was the best option for both himself and the Su family. However, Chen Zong still wouldn't forget the last wish of the dragon slayer. One day, when he had enough strength, he would fulfill it. Senior, I will remember the last wish of the Su family's ancestor. One day I will fulfill it. Goodbye. Without any hesitation, Chen Zong immediately left. However, it was a little too late. The door of the Su family was rudely pushed open. Two people swaggered in with fierce looks on their faces. The Su family's martial artists were all furious, but they didn't dare to make a move. 2-second transition of the Qi refining realm. Chen Zong could tell the cultivation level of the two men at a glance. The two men didn't hide their aura fluctuations. On the contrary, they deliberately let out some of their aura to intimidate the Su family. It's you. What's your name? What's your background? Tell me everything. The Qi refining realm martial artist on the left pointed his finger at Chen Zong and said arrogantly, "It doesn't matter." Chen Zong replied calmly. From the reaction of the Su family, it was obvious that these two Qi refining realm martial artists often came to the Su family. Maybe the new Qi refining realm martial artist was killed by them. Since it doesn't matter, then die. The Qi refining realm martial artist on the right was even more direct. As soon as he finished speaking, he clenched his fist and punched out. The terrifying force of the punch shattered the air. The fist pressure was so strong that it seemed to contain the power to smash a mountain. "Be careful!" Su Yuanda exclaimed. The other Su family martial artists also subconsciously clenched their fists and widened their eyes. This punch carried a strong murderous intent. It was meant to kill Chen Zong. Chen Zong's method of dealing with people who wanted to kill him had always been simple. However, this was within the Su family. His body flashed as he used the wind and water step to dodge the attack. He jumped over the Su family's wall and quickly left. After him, the two Qi refining realm martial artists immediately chased after him. This kind of battle was not something the Su family could interfere in. Su Yuanda sighed deeply. With his experience, he could naturally see that this young man was worried about implicating the Su family. With one fleeing and two pursuing, Chen Zong rushed out of Jiaoniu town and went further away. It was only when he reached the foot of a mountain that he stopped and turned around. Not running anymore? The two men caught up and surrounded Chen Zong on the left and right, cutting off his escape route. Then, the man from before attacked again and punched out. He waved his right hand and the great thunderclap hand appeared. A feeling of perfection spread out. His palm seemed to have turned into a thunderclap that swept through the air. Although he attacked later, he arrived first. He passed by the man's fist and hit the man's chest first. There was no way to dodge. With a bang, the man flew out. Blood gushed out of his mouth like it was worthless. After he landed, he rolled a few times. His head tilted to one side and he died. You actually killed him. You're going to die too. The other Qi refining realm martial artist who had gone through the second transition yelled. He struck out with his palm. This palm was like a crumbling mountain. However, in the blink of an eye, he suddenly retracted his palm and retreated at an even faster speed. He was fast, but Chen Zong was faster. With a single step, he crossed 20 meters. He arrived in front of the man in an instant and then struck out with his palm. With a bang, the man's body flew far away like a ragged sack. He rolled a few times and spat out blood. However, he did not die because Chen Zong showed mercy and did not want him to die immediately. Who are you? Where are you from? Tell me everything. Chen Zong stood in front of the man and looked down at him who was struggling to get up. His cold and sharp gaze pierced into the man's eyes. Let me tell you, we are all from the Overlord Martial League. We are the subordinates of Lord Dragon General. You killed us today and you will be killed in the future. The man's tone was fierce. You won't be able to see it. Chen Zong's eyelids twitched. After killing the man, he threw the two bodies into the mountains to feed the beasts and destroy the evidence. Let's go back to the real Sword Academy first, Chen Zong said to himself. Without any hesitation, he left immediately. To a certain extent, he had already provoked Lord Dragon General by involving the Su family and killing people from the Overlord Martial League. However, it was obvious that he could not compete with him now. He could only rely on the power of the real Sword Academy. If one wanted to go further on the path of martial arts, one's own strength was the most important. However, sometimes one also needed to rely on others. Chen Zong used all his speed to rush back and thought to himself, as for coming to this point, did he regret it? No, he did not. After all, he wanted to fulfill the last wish of the dragon-slaying immortal. However, all these things were completely out of his expectations. If he had known about it earlier, he might have thought about it more deeply and thought twice before acting. However, there were no ifs. What happened was what happened. He could only think of ways to solve it. After returning to the real Sword Academy, I will immediately challenge the number 1 on the Iron Sword list. After that, I will challenge the 7 Sword Stars, Chen Zong thought to himself. The higher his position in the real Sword Academy, the more protection he would receive. Moreover, if he succeeded in challenging the 7 Sword Stars and ranked first, he would be able to practice better techniques and sword technique. At that time, his strength would be even more tyrannical. After Chen Zong left Jiaonyou town, another group of warriors in the Qi refining realm quickly broke in and headed straight for the Su family. The leader was a terrifying person whose cultivation had reached the 7th transformation of the Qi refining realm. The rest of the people were all in the middle stage of the Qi refining realm. They were the people sent by Shun Ling. Their purpose was to capture Chen Zong alive. Fortunately, they did not cross the mountains but took the main road. It was also fortunate that Chen Zong had left in time. Otherwise, if he had encountered them, he would not have been able to escape even if he had used all his strength. Chapter 176. Challenging by Yu Xiao. Fiendish Sword Star Fei Yuanji had a wicked smile on his handsome face when he heard the news. He cut down the iron pillar in front of him with one strike. Silver Sword Star was surprised when he heard the news, but he did not say anything. Wufeng Sword Star Lu Wufeng was very surprised. It seemed that not long ago, this person had a conflict with the Lu sect. It was stopped because of Fei Yuanji's intervention. Now, he had defeated Yan Feng and became the number 1 on the Iron Sword ranking. He wanted to challenge Bai Yuxiao directly. Regardless of whether he succeeded or failed, it showed that this person's talent and potential were indeed amazing. It was unwise to make such a person an enemy, unless one could kill him instantly. Fortunately, the conflict between him and the Lu sect was not deep. As the leader of a sect, Lu Wufeng was not impulsive. Oh, this batch of new disciples is very arrogant. Leijin Sword Star put down his wine cup after hearing the news. He was surprised. Being too arrogant will not end well. This was Lai Feng's Sword Star's words. He has guts, but I don't know if he has the strength to match it. Earth Essence Sword Star smiled as he wiped his long sword. No matter how people reacted after hearing the news, the time of the battle between Chen Zong and Bai Yuxiao was set. 3 days later, Bai Yuxiao wiped the sword in his hand until it shone. The blade was like a mirror, reflecting a pair of cold eyes that contained a fierce, killing intent. Originally, Bai Yuxiao was still vexed over what kind of opportunity he should find to cripple Chen Zong. Otherwise, the longer he dragged it out, the more time Chen Zong would have to cultivate, and the harder it would be to get rid of him. He did not expect that Chen Zong would challenge him directly and give him such a good opportunity. Chen Zong, you only have a few days left. Enjoy it. Bai Yuxiao's fingers touched the cold blade, and his words were full of killing intent. 3 days was actually a short time, but no matter what, Chen Zong would not relax at all. He cultivated the great mixed essence force and body forging technique as usual. He took 3 mid-grade energy training pills every day, and his inner force was getting stronger and stronger. He was gradually approaching the middle stage of the 3rd transformation of the energy training realm. He did not stop cultivating the sword art and the great thunderclap hand. He had also been comprehending the heart, eye, and hand realm. Time flowed like water, never to return. Go, go, go. Quick. The sword martial arena opened, and the official disciples entered one by one. The challenge of the 7 sword stars was a major event. If he missed it, he would regret it for a long time. Other than the disciples who had gone out to train, all the other official disciples were present, including the 7 sword stars. In addition, some of the Palace Guardian disciples had also come to watch the battle. For most of the Palace Guardian disciples, the 7 sword stars were once their dream and goal. However, they had never been able to achieve it. They did not dare to underestimate them. After all, once any of the 7 sword stars broke through to the 4th cycle of the Qi refining realm, they would become a Palace Guardian disciple without the need for assessment. Their strength was considered to be at the top of the 4th cycle of the Qi refining realm. Compared to the challenge of the Iron Sword list, the challenge of the 7 sword stars was much grander and was presided over by an elder of the official disciples. Let's welcome the number 1 on the Iron Sword leaderboard, Chun Zong, Purple Firmament Sword Star. By Yu Xiao. As the elder's voice sounded, 2 figures jumped up from both sides of the arena and landed on the arena in different postures, facing each other from a distance. Today, the number 1 on the Iron Sword list, Chun Zong, challenges one of the 7 sword stars, Purple Firmament Sword Star, by Yu Xiao. This elder will be presiding over it. The elder looked around and spoke in a neither fast nor slow manner. His voice was deep and resounding like thunder. Finally, his gaze swept across Chun Zong and Bai Yuxiao, as if he could see through them. Remember, this is a challenge, not a life-and-death battle. You are not allowed to kill. Yes. Chun Zong and Bai Yuxiao bowed in response. The 2 of them were naturally using ceremonial swords. Although their killing power was not as strong as real swords, they could still kill if they wanted to. After all, they were not weak. Now, this elder announces the challenge. The elder's voice sounded. Everyone's hearts were in their mouths. Their eyes were focused, fearing that they would miss any details. Chun Zong and Bai Yuxiao also circulated their inner strength to get themselves into the best condition. Their swords were ready to move. Begin. As soon as the elder finished speaking, Bai Yuxiao's entire body shot out like an arrow from a bow. His speed was astonishing. In the blink of an eye, he had traversed more than 10 meters and was closing in on Chun Zong. At the same time, Chun Zong also burst forth with astonishing speed, but his body was incomparably light. It was as if he was riding on the wind as he approached Bai Yuxiao. Their eyes were extremely sharp, like sharp swords that could pierce through everything. When they collided, invisible ripples seemed to spread out. In the blink of an eye, they closed in, their right hands holding the hilt of their swords. 2 ear-piercing sounds were heard. Flashes of sharp light cut through the air and slashed at each other. Their swords missed. At the last moment, both of them dodged with nimble footsteps. When the 2 swords collided, sparks flew. They turned around, staggered, and attacked. With a twist of their wrists, the ceremonial swords bloomed with brilliant sword shadows. The great origin force was vigorous and upright, while the extreme purple sword force was tough and sharp. Both of them did not use any sword technique. They were purely attacking with their swords. With their own understanding and foundation of sword techniques, they attacked each other. This kind of sword fight was extremely dangerous. If one was not careful, they would be hit. Even if the ceremonial swords were not sharpened, they still had terrifying lethality. Every move and sword performed by both of them was soul-stirring. It made people blush with excitement, and they subconsciously clenched their fists. Oh, your swordsmanship is not bad. Lei Zhen Jianxing raised his eyebrows and said with surprise. It's just not bad. Zephyr Swordsman heard and smiled. Not bad, not bad. Seems like our sect will have another top genius. Who knows, he might be able to compete with the 7 Sword Sons in the future. Yao Jianxing said to himself. While they were talking, Chen Zong and Bai Yuxiao's sword speed increased again. Countless sword shadows and sword lights intertwined, colliding again and again, canceling each other out before appearing again. They have increased again. Bai Yuxiao's eyes were obscure. How long had it been since the last time they fought? At that time, Chen Zong did not even have the strength to fight back. But now, he was able to fight against him head-on. The killing intent in his heart grew stronger, and it was reflected in his swordsmanship. Every sword was sharper and more deadly. The elder frowned slightly. Feeling the changes in Bai Yuxiao's swordsmanship, Chen Zong was 100% sure that this Bai Yuxiao was the mysterious black-clothed man who tried to kill him back then. You want to kill me, but I want to kill you too, Chen Zong said to himself. His swordsmanship had also undergone some changes. Every sword was more concise and direct, sharper and more decisive. The profoundness of severing wind swordsmanship was integrated into every sword, intercepting Bai Yuxiao's attacks. Bai Yuxiao had also integrated the profoundness of an earth-level lower-rank swordsmanship into his swordsmanship. Every sword was extremely sharp. It was the golden-edge swordsmanship. Fight, fight, fight. Bai Yuxiao, you didn't expect me to still be alive, right? Chen Zong said in a low voice. His voice entered Bai Yuxiao's ears. Junior brother, what did you say? Bai Yuxiao pretended not to understand. Of course, he would not admit it directly. Otherwise, he would not have deliberately hidden himself that day. Chen Zong smiled coldly and did not speak again. Suddenly, he changed his swordsmanship and a ray of light appeared. The first ray of light appeared. As the sword fell, the blade disappeared, leaving only a ray of light in the air. The speed of the sword was astonishingly fast. In terms of cultivation, Chen Zong was at the 3rd transformation of the Qi refining realm, while Bai Yuxiao was at the peak of the 3rd transformation of the Qi refining realm. Under normal circumstances, there would be a difference in the purity of their internal forces. Moreover, Chen Zong practiced an earth-level upper-rank technique, while Bai Yuxiao practiced an earth-level top-rank technique. The difference in the purity of their internal forces was even more obvious. However, this difference was erased by the primitive internal force cultivated by the leakless body. The power of their internal forces were on par. The rest was a contest of swordsmanship and skills. Bai Yuxiao changed his swordsmanship, bringing a strong gust of wind, which turned into a storm and swept out. Earth-level upper-rank storm swordsmanship. As the two swords collided, thousands of dazzling sparks sputtered in all directions. It was very bright. The ray of light dissipated and the storm disappeared. Only after the two swords collided, they brushed past each other and slashed towards each other's faces. At the critical moment, they both dodged and counterattacked, colliding again. Suddenly, his left hand shot out like a thunderbolt, striking towards Bai Yuxiao. The timing of this palm was exquisite and unexpected. It was like a stroke of God. The elder's eyes lit up and he secretly nodded. Bai Yuxiao was shocked, but he reacted quickly. He waved his scabbard with his left hand and collided with Chen Zong's left palm. He took advantage of the momentum to retreat, and the sword in his right hand turned into a storm and swept out. Good! The elder nodded and praised. If it were anyone else, they would have been hit by Chen Zong's sudden palm. 8 directional 4 steps. Evading, Chen Zong appeared beside Bai Yuxiao and stabbed out with his sword. The speed of his sword was frighteningly fast, but what it pierced was only an afterimage. Bai Yuxiao mysteriously appeared behind Chen Zong and slashed out with his sword. However, this attack also missed, and Chen Zong once again appeared beside him to counterattack. The fighting style of the two sides, from the previous head-on confrontation, suddenly became strange and unpredictable, which made everyone's scalp tingle and hair stand on end. His strength is actually so strong. After 3 days of recuperation, Yan Feng had basically recovered. When he came to watch the battle, he found that Chen Zong's swordsmanship was so brilliant and seemed to be stronger than when he fought with him that day. If Chen Zong had such swordsmanship that day, he estimated that he would not have been able to block many of his attacks, and would have been defeated even more directly and thoroughly. In just 3 days, can he really improve so much? Yan Feng could not help but wonder, and then he came up with another guess. Could it be that he did not show his true strength that day? When he thought of the second guess, Yan Feng's state of mind that had just been adjusted was hit again, and he became a little depressed. The two figures rampaged around the arena, performing exquisite footwork and swordsmanship again and again, chasing each other, but they could not do anything to each other. What is Bai Yuxiao doing? Lei Jin's Sword Star frowned. He did not even show his true strength. Zephyr Sword Star was the same. The reason why Seven Sword Star was called Seven Sword Star and had unparalleled strength was because in addition to practicing Earth-level top-grade cultivation techniques, they also practiced Earth-level top-grade sword technique. At this time, although Bai Yuxiao had the unique inner strength cultivated from Earth-level top-grade cultivation techniques, he did not perform Earth-level top-grade sword techniques, so he did not show his true strength. Chapter 177. Bai Yuxiao performed the storm swordsmanship to his heart's content. It was as if he was not holding a sword, but the power of a storm. However, Chen Zong's hand did not seem to be holding a sword, but a floating light in the sky. Apart from holding back some trump cards, both of them had pushed their swordsmanship to the extreme. Their inner strength surged, making each strike extremely powerful. Fight, fight, fight. Under Chen Zong's sword light, it turned into countless clouds, as if forming a sea of clouds. Suddenly, a light that was not dazzling, but with unparalleled sharpness, broke through the sea of clouds and fell heavily, breaking Bai Yuxiao's storm swordsmanship in an instant. Suddenly, Bai Yuxiao's sword paused, and a surge of skyrocketing intent filled the air. The sword seemed to be able to pierce through the clouds, and it pierced toward Chen Zong with amazing speed and power. The sword was unstoppable. The falling skylight was directly pierced through, and the rolling sea of clouds was also penetrated by the sword. A strong sense of danger filled Chen Zong's whole body, making his hair stand on end. The basic sword move of the superior Earth-rank sword technique, sword soaring to the sky. Even though it was just a basic sword move, it was still very powerful. Moreover, this sword technique was a set with the extreme purple sword force, which could exert the power of the extreme purple sword force to the extreme. Under the stimulation of the extreme purple sword force, its power could also reach the extreme. This sword strike brought a fatal crisis to Chen Zong. His pupils contracted instantly, and his face became cold. A trace of inexplicable aura spread out from his body, and he immediately entered the state of mind, eye and hand in one. Everything outside became clearer, especially the trajectory of Bai Yuxiao's sword. The tip of the sword bloomed with amazing sharpness, vibrating at a very high frequency, but it never left the center, which produced a terrible penetrating force that could break through anything. This was the secret of sword soaring to the sky. However, Chen Zong could see the secret, but he could not use it, because that was only the surface. Inside, it involved the operation of inner strength, which could not be seen. However, Chen Zong's purpose was not to learn it, but to break it. This was enough. He drew his sword. With the combination of mind, eye, hand, and sword, the heart, the eye, the hand, and the sword, in the blink of an eye, 13 swords hit the different parts of the sword. Each sword contained Chen Zong's ultimate strength, and when stacked together, it reached a whole new level. The soaring sword was delayed by Chen Zong's severing wind 13 strikes, which gave Chen Zong a chance to dodge the attack with the help of the 8-directional 4-pole step. He appeared beside Bai Yuxiao and attacked again. He actually dodged it. Especially the 7 sword stars, who were more aware of the power of the Earth-grade sword art. It was completely beyond their expectations that Chen Zong could dodge it in an instant. Not bad, Lei Jianxing muttered. Zephyr Sword Star frowned slightly. He didn't say anything, but his face didn't look good. This unexpected feeling was very unpleasant. The Essence Sword Star's hand that was wiping her sword also stopped. The elder's eyelids twitched, and he was unable to maintain his composure. He wasn't surprised that Chen Zong dodged Bai Yuxiao's soaring sword. He was surprised by the aura emanating from Chen Zong's body. It was a unique aura. It was obviously the aura of someone who had stepped into the martial path. It didn't seem like Chen Zong had just stepped into the martial path. It should have been a while. An initial stage Qi refining realm martial artist had already stepped into the martial path. In the history of mankind, this wasn't unprecedented, but it was very rare. In this era, only 3 people had done it, and they were the 3 geniuses of the True Martial Alliance. Could it be that the True Sword Academy is going to produce a top genius comparable to the 3 geniuses? The elder was secretly excited. His heart was beating wildly, and even his breathing became hurried. If the True Sword Academy really produced a top genius comparable to the 3 geniuses, they would be able to surpass the other 3 academies and become the leader of the 4 academies. Up until now, the Tianwu Academy was recognized as the #1 academy. Under the martial path realm, Chen Zong's senses had been raised to the extreme. He could clearly sense everything around him, and the trajectory of Bai Yuxiao's sword was even clearer. The combination of the heart, eye and hand allowed Chen Zong's sword to move faster. He condensed his strength into one, reducing consumption and increasing utilization. He tried his best to use every bit of his strength to the extreme. Under this state, the power of the severing wind 13 swords was unleashed beyond its limits. Every sword was exquisite to the extreme. He's even harder to deal with than last time. Bai Yuxiao had experienced it firsthand. When Chen Zong had entered this state, it wasn't stable enough. Now it was stable, and it had improved. According to Bai Yuxiao's investigation, he already knew that this state was the so-called martial path realm. The 7 sword stars hadn't stepped into the martial path realm, but a new disciple had. This made Bai Yuxiao feel even more threatened. After the soaring sword, Bai Yuxiao's inner strength surged. The ceremonial sword in his hand trembled slightly, and a blinding sword light shot out. Sword Qi Soaring Sword. This was the second move of the soaring sword art, and also one of the unique moves. As the sword stabbed out, the sword light immediately split into several beams. Each beam was shockingly powerful, surpassing the power of the soaring heavens sword. Before the sword arrived, an astonishing sword Qi had already attacked. It pierced through the air and landed on Chen Zong's skin, causing his hair to stand on end and his hair to stand on end. This move was made by Bai Yuxiao with all his strength. Even if it was the ceremonial sword, with its oval tip, Chen Zong would be pierced through if he was stabbed. His tough skin, which was comparable to the skin of a demonic beast, couldn't protect him. The elder also saw that Bai Yuxiao wanted to kill Chen Zong. He was ready to intervene at any time. As a warrior of the real martial arts realm, and standing in the arena, there was no difference between dozens of meters and a few meters. He was completely confident that he could save Chen Zong in an instant. However, he didn't intervene now because he wanted to see how Chen Zong would deal with Bai Yuxiao's move. Under the martial arts realm, Chen Zong could feel a strong sense of danger. A chill ran down his spine. Chen Zong's expression remained cold and his eyes became increasingly deep. Under the pressure of this murderous intent, Chen Zong felt his mind become even more focused. It was as if his potential was being stimulated. The terrible sword chi attacked him, bringing with it an amazing sword pressure that almost suffocated him. Those sword lights tore everything to shreds, piercing forward with an indomitable will. Silent wind. Wind from the south to the north. Wind cutter 13 strikes. In an instant, Chen Zong continuously performed the unique moves and killing moves of the wind cutter swordsmanship. Under the martial arts realm, the power of each move was stimulated to the extreme, exceeding the limit. The power of each sword was condensed to the extreme, fast, steady, accurate, and ruthless. The sword light was shattered. Bai Yuxiao's sword chi soaring sword continued to attack, but Chen Zong could clearly see that the power contained in it was beginning to become unstable. Skylight piercing clouds. The killing move of the skylight swordsmanship was performed. This sword had reached the peak of the profound realm and was close to the consummation. Its power was much stronger than before. When the sword fell, there was no sword shadow. There was only a flash of light between heaven and earth, filling one's eyes. The sword light was shattered one after another. Chen Zong's sword directly slashed at Bai Yuxiao's head without any mercy. It would not stop until one of them was dead. Bai Yuxiao's hair stood on end. In his eyes, this sword strike was perfect. It made him feel that he could not avoid it. It was as if his front, back, left, and right were blocked. There was nowhere to hide, even if he used his body movement. It was the same. There was no way to avoid it. He could only take it head-on. However, he had just performed the sword chi soaring sword. The internal force in his body had not completely flowed back, so it limited his body to a certain extent. "You forced me to do this," Bai Yuxiao whispered, his voice full of hatred. With a boom, a terrible aura burst out from Bai Yuxiao's body. It was as if it had been accumulating for a long time. In an instant, it broke through and produced a terrible pressure, oppressing the surrounding air. The pressure was amazing. It was like an invisible wave rushing out. It also blocked Chen Zong's sword for a moment. That moment was enough. Bai Yuxiao retreated. It seemed that his internal force was even more powerful. The sword in his hand trembled slightly. The tip of the sword vibrated at a frequency that exceeded the limit. It was a stab. A sword soaring sword. Chen Zong's pupils contracted. The sense of death enveloped him. This sword strike was more than twice as powerful as before. Bai Yuxiao had broken through at the critical moment and reached the fourth transformation of the Qi refining realm. The difference between the fourth transformation and the third transformation was the difference between the middle stage and the early stage. It was very obvious that Bai Yuxiao had just broken through. His internal force had not been completely transformed. Otherwise, it would be even more terrifying. Even so, this sword strike still gave Chen Zong a feeling that he could not avoid or resist. Especially in the realm of martial arts, that feeling was even clearer and more obvious. It was as if he could only wait for death. It would make people feel despair. The greater the pressure, the greater the rebound. Chen Zong used the opportunity to resist that feeling of despair. He unleashed all his potential and broke through to the middle stage of the third transformation of the Qi refining realm. The slight improvement brought about a change in strength. A slight difference was enough to change life and death. Flashing thunder killing sword. With a strike of the sword, his internal force surged. The sword disappeared, leaving behind only a flash of lightning. Collision. A terrifying force surged. A strong light filled the air. Countless sparks flew in all directions. Among the sparks, there were also pieces of debris that pierced the air. Those were the fragments of the ceremonial sword. Retreat, retreat, retreat. Chen Zong retreated to the edge of the arena. There was only half of the ceremonial sword left in his hand. The webbing between his thumb and forefinger that held the sword was torn and bleeding. His arm could not help but tremble uncontrollably. The qi and blood in his body were surging like a tidal wave. There was a tearing pain in his body. Bai Yuxiao also retreated a few steps. There was only half of the ceremonial sword left in his hand. However, his palm was unharmed. His eyes were sharp and his killing intent was extremely strong. It was like a tidal wave that wanted to drown Chen Zong. After a short pause, Bai Yuxiao immediately rushed forward. He did not hesitate to break through his cultivation. He would not stop until he killed Chen Zong. Stop! At the critical moment, the elder intervened and stopped Bai Yuxiao. Bai Yuxiao's heart sank. The thing he was most worried about had happened. With the elder's intervention, it was impossible for him to kill Chen Zong. He did not know when he would be able to find a suitable opportunity next time. In this battle, Bai Yuxiao's cultivation has broken through and he has been promoted to the palace guarding disciple. The elder took a deep look at Bai Yuxiao, causing Bai Yuxiao's body to tremble. Chen Zong's strength is astonishing, and he is promoted to one of the 7 sword stars, effective immediately. As for his title, it will be decided after Chen Zong has finished choosing his top-grade earth-level cultivation technique and martial art. With the final decision, no one could object. He Tialin's face was pale. Chapter 178. Thank you to Ancient Sword Xiao Feng for the 10k tip. The battle ended in a way that was completely out of everyone's expectations. The result was also out of everyone's expectations. Even Chen Zong and Bai Yuxiao did not expect it to turn out this way. Both Chen Zong and Bai Yuxiao were regretful that they could not take advantage of this opportunity to severely injure or even cripple the other party. As for killing the other party, the chances were slim. But overall, Chen Zong gained more and became one of the 7 sword stars. As for Bai Yuxiao, he was extremely frustrated. His cultivation had already reached the peak of the 3rd cycle of the Force Training Realm. He could break through to the 4th cycle of the Force Training Realm at any time, but he had been unwilling to break through. His goal was to further strengthen his foundation while he was in the 3rd cycle. When he reached his limit, he would be able to rapidly increase his cultivation and reach the peak of the 4th cycle. Not only Bai Yuxiao, but the other 6 sword stars were also doing the same. All of them were trying their best to strengthen their foundations. Otherwise, they would have already become palace-guarding disciples. Chen Zong, have you already mastered the heart, eye and hand combination and entered the martial path? Elder Lin asked with a smile. Yes. Chen Zong was not surprised. After all, Elder Lin was a true martial realm elite. It was normal for him to be able to tell. When did you master it? Elder Lin asked again. About half a year ago. Chen Zong naturally would not say that he was in the blood qi realm. That would be too shocking. Half a year ago, his cultivation should still be in the early stage of the 2nd transformation of the Force Training Realm. This was enough to attract attention. Half a year ago, Elder Lin's heart skipped a beat. He was shocked, but his gaze toward Chen Zong was filled with satisfaction. Very good. Continue to work hard. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me anytime. I'll tell you everything I know. Elder Lin said with a smile. He remembered clearly that the 3 prodigies had mastered the heart, eye and hand combination and entered the martial path. The earliest was the feudal martial prodigy, who was also at the peak of the 2nd transformation of the Force Training Realm. As for the bitter dust prodigy and the purple moon prodigy, they entered the martial path after reaching the 3rd transformation of the Force Training Realm. From this point alone, Chen Zong had a considerable advantage. Chen Zong, follow me to pick a earth-level martial art and sword art, Elder Lin said as he led Chen Zong. Top-grade earth-tier martial arts were extremely precious and hard to come by. The sword martial tower did not keep them. Instead, they were kept in an even more secretive place, built 10 meters underground. There was also a door made of 3 layers of bronze that was tightly shut. The surrounding walls were also made of steel and were very thick. Even if a true martial realm expert wanted to break through it, it would still take some time. Our True Sword Academy has a total of 7 sets of earth-level techniques and sword techniques. Elder Lin said as he opened the door to the secret chamber. However, every set is incomplete. The cultivation technique lacks the final layer, and the sword technique lacks the final killing move. Incomplete. Chernzong was shocked. He realized how precious these earth-level martial arts and techniques were. The True Sword Academy was one of the 4 great academies and was considered one of the top existences in the entire Eastern continent. It was normal for them to have 7 sets of top-grade earth-grade martial art. However, it was surprising that they were all incomplete. Among the 4 great academies, only the Tianwu Academy has a complete set of earth-level martial arts, Elder Lin explained. The Zhenwu Alliance has more. They have 3 sets. 7 sets of earth-level martial art. You have seen one of them. That is the Extreme Purple Sword Force and the Soaring Cloud Sword Technique. The others are the Silver Sword Force and the Silver Light Sword Technique, the Purple Star Sword Force and the Yi Chen Sword Technique, the Hurricane Sword Force and the Hurricane Sword Technique, the Thunderclap Sword Force and the Thunder Sword Technique, the Earth Elemental Sword Force and the Mystic Elemental Sword Technique, the Dustless Sword Force and the Heavy Edge Sword Technique. Elder Lin explained one by one. Sword Force is different from ordinary inner force. It's more suitable for swordsman martial artists as it can bring out the sharpness of the sword to the fullest. The inner force cultivated from the Purple Pole Sword Force is both tough and sharp. Activating the Soaring Sword Technique will give one the momentum to break through the clouds. Its power is both instantaneous and continuous. The Silver Sword Force is both sharp and sharp. Its power is very condensed and its penetrative power is amazing. The Silver Light Sword Technique is very fast. It mainly attacks with points and lines, piercing through everything. Chernzong listened attentively as Elder Lin explained in detail. Soon, the 7 sets of earth-level martial arts were explained. So, which set do you choose? Elder Lin asked. Chernzong was a little surprised. He thought he would be cultivating the Extreme Purple Sword Force and the Soaring Cloud Sword Technique after defeating Bai Yuxiao. Elder Lin did not urge him as he pondered. The secret room made of steel fell into silence. If you choose the Extreme Purple Sword Force and the Soaring Cloud Sword Technique, there shouldn't be any trouble. But if you choose the other 6 sets of martial arts, the other 6 sword stars will probably come to you. Elder Lin thought of something and reminded him. Chernzong nodded subconsciously and then looked up. Elder, I choose the Thunderclap Sword Force and the Thunderlight Sword Technique. Are you sure? Elder Lin sounded surprised. The one cultivating the Thunderclap Sword Force and the Thunderlight Sword Technique is the Thunder Sword Star, Gao Luoshan. It is said that he has a bad temper. He will be fine under my sword. Chernzong replied. Good boy. Elder Lin chuckled. Soon after, he took out the Thunderclap Sword Force and the Thunderclap Sword Technique. The 2 of them were gathered in a book. The cover of the book was black and purple. The skin was rough, but it felt good to the touch. It seemed to be made of some kind of animal skin. The earth-level martial arts are too precious. In order to prevent losing them, you should read them here and remember them. It doesn't matter. If you can't remember them this time, you can come again tomorrow until you remember them all. Elder Lin said. Chernzong nodded as he flipped open the book to read. It was divided into 2 parts. The first part was the Thunderclap Sword Force and the second part was the Thunderlight Sword Technique. The complete earth-level martial arts should have 5 levels, but the Thunderclap Sword Force only had 4 levels. The Thunderlight Sword Technique had 11 moves, so the complete one should have 12. Of course, although it was incomplete, it was still more powerful than the upper earth-level martial art. Chernzong first quickly flipped through it, then carefully read it again from the beginning. Word by word, he completely memorized it in his mind, as if it was branded. Then, He read it a third time to strengthen his memory. "Thank you, Elder Lin. I'll remember it," Chern Zong said respectfully and handed the book back to Elder Lin. "Well, it doesn't matter if you don't remember them all. You can come again tomorrow." Elder Lin nodded. Then, he was stunned. "What did you just say? You memorized them all?" "Yes." Chern Zong nodded. "You really memorized them?" Elder Lin's tone was hurried. "No, I have to test you." After the test, Elder Lin's face was full of shock. This kind of memory was too scary. When he came back to his senses, Elder Lin spoke again in a serious tone. "Remember, you've memorized the contents of this book. You must not write it down to avoid accidentally leaking it." "Yes." Chern Zong nodded. After all, these belonged to the Real Sword Academy. "Okay, since you've memorized them, go back and cultivate well. Try to improve your strength." Elder Lin nodded and left the secret room with Chern Zong. Chern Zong said goodbye and returned to the small courtyard. He was ready to move to the Seven Sword Stars residence. "Junior. Brother Chen." He Tylin was pacing back and forth at the entrance of the small courtyard. When he saw Chern Zong walking over, his face changed. He stammered and his face flushed. "Is there something you need, senior brother?" Chern Zong's tone was neither high nor low. His attitude was also neutral. "No." Even so, He Tylin could not stand in front of Chern Zong. It could not be helped. Not long ago, the strength Chern Zong displayed was too shocking. That day, he swallowed 250 sword merit points to exchange for more cultivation resources. He wanted to use them to break through to the fourth transformation of the Qi refining realm. When that time came, he would have a high chance of becoming a core disciple and be above the official disciples. Naturally, he would not have to worry about Chern Zong. However, he did not expect that after using up all the resources he had exchanged, he was still stuck at a bottleneck and could not break through. On the other hand, Chern Zong had grown rapidly. Now, he was even one of the 7 sword stars. Such terrifying potential made He Tylin extremely regretful. In the end, he decided to apologize. "If there's nothing else, senior brother, please leave. It's fine as long as you don't provoke me." Chern Zong could see through He Tylin's thoughts. However, the more experience he had, the more he had a different perspective. He did not care about it before, so it was even more impossible now. "Thank you, junior brother. Thank you, junior brother." He Tylin bowed again and again. He looked very grateful, but inside, he felt ashamed and resentful. However, there was nothing he could do. Without looking at He Tylin again, Chern Zong opened the courtyard door and walked in. He quickly packed up and went to the 7 Sword Stars residence. 7 large pavilions were arranged in different directions. One of them was Chern Zong's residence. The interior of the pavilion had already been cleaned. Everything that needed to be replaced had been replaced with new ones. It didn't look luxurious, but it had a kind of style. The artistic conception was simple and elegant, and it contained a bit of depth. Chern Zong was very satisfied. There were 2 maids who were responsible for daily life. "You may leave. I'm going to cultivate in seclusion. No one is to disturb me," Chern Zong ordered. "Yes." The 2 maids bowed. Different from the small courtyard where he lived before, this large pavilion had a secret room specially for closed-door cultivation. It was enclosed and safe. Sitting cross-legged, Chern Zong began to recall the contents of the thunder-shocking sword force. Chern Zong had his own considerations for choosing this set of script. That was the Extreme Flash Thunder Killing Sword. Through the Thunderbolt hand, Chern Zong had proved the benefits of the Extreme Flash Thunder Killing Sword. Then, it should be useful for the comprehension of the thunder-shocking sword force and the thunder sword technique. Right now, what he pursued was to improve his cultivation and strength even faster. When Chern Zong began to cultivate the extreme earth-level thunder-shocking sword force in seclusion, in another pavilion, The thunder-shocking sword star and the gale sword star were sitting opposite each other, drinking and chatting. I wonder what scripts he will choose? The thunder-shocking sword star, Gao Luoshan, said casually. It's best to choose the extreme purple sword force and the soaring sky sword technique. The gale sword star, Lu Minji, said. Maybe he will choose the storm sword force and the hurricane sword technique. Gao Shanluo drank the wine in his cup and said with a faint smile. If he really dares, I'll let him know the consequences. Lu Minji's lips curled into a sinister smile. He was not intimidated by Chen Zong's display of strength. He was very confident in himself. Chapter 179. Changing cultivation methods meant that one's strength would decline for a period of time. Therefore, one must spend time in seclusion to pass this stage. The length of time was closely related to one's ability. It was not difficult for Chen Zong to comprehend the thunderclap sword force. It took him 3 days to comprehend the mysteries of the first to the fourth level. Next, it was time to start cultivating. Internal force circulated in the body according to the trajectory of the first level of the thunderclap sword force. Although the thunderclap sword force was a superior earth-level cultivation method, there was still a significant gap between the first level and the fourth level of the Great Origin Force. It was very difficult to transform the fourth level of the Great Origin Force into the first level of the thunderclap sword force. Chen Zong circulated it over and over again without stopping, once again showing the power of the leakless body. Half a day later, the first wisp of the thunderclap sword force was refined. Compared with the Great Origin Force, the thunderclap sword force was not only more condensed, but also more vigorous. Moreover, it carried a kind of sharpness that the Great Origin Force did not have. It is indeed the most suitable cultivation method for sword warriors. Chen Zong was secretly amazed. He controlled the wisp of thunderclap sword force with all his strength, constantly circulating it, making it grow little by little and transforming the Great Origin Force. Although the Great Origin Force resisted passively, without Chen Zong's consciousness to guide it, it was getting less and less. It was constantly being transformed by the thunderclap sword force. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. The last wisp of the Great Origin Force was transformed into the thunderclap sword force. Chen Zong's body was full of the thunderclap sword force. He immediately felt that his cultivation had not decreased, but his strength had decreased. After all, the first level of the thunderclap sword force was still not comparable to the fourth level of the Great Origin Force in terms of purity. However, the thunderclap sword force was a superior earth-level cultivation method after all. In terms of potential, it was far superior to the Great Origin Force. He continued to cultivate over and over again. The next day, the thunderclap sword force broke through and reached the second level. Whether in terms of vigor or purity, it was obviously improved. Compared with the fourth level of the Great Origin Force, there was only a small gap. As long as the thunderclap sword force reaches the third level, it can surpass the Great Origin Force in the fourth level. At that time, the strength will be stronger than the other level. Chen Zong thought. When it was time for Chen Zong to cultivate every day, the maids would bring him food so that he would have nothing to worry about. On the 10th day of his closed-door training in the secret chamber, Chen Zong's body suddenly emitted a strong aura. The aura was shockingly domineering and contained a terrifying sharpness that seemed to be able to cut through everything. Like an illusion, the tyrannical aura quieted down. Chen Zong's eyes then opened, shooting out a shocking sharpness that could pierce through all nothingness. The thunder-shocking sword force has finally reached the third level. In terms of quantity, it is similar to the fourth level of the mixed yuan force. However, in terms of purity, it is 30% better than the fourth level of the mixed yuan force. As he spoke, the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. If I can reach the 4th level, regardless of whether it is the quantity or the purity, it will definitely increase again. Chunzong had made up his mind to cultivate the Thunderclap sword force to the 4th level before he started to cultivate the Thunderlight sword technique. The 4th level was more difficult to cultivate than the 3rd level. Chunzong practiced diligently every day, but it still took him 10 days to reach the 4th level. Feeling the strong sword force in his body that was far superior to the 4th level of the mixed yuan force, Chunzong's face was full of smiles. It's a pity that I lack the 5th level. Otherwise, if I can reach the 5th level, it will definitely be more powerful. Chunzong thought to himself. The last level of every cultivation method was the most difficult to cultivate. However, once it was mastered, it would also be the most powerful. After 20 days, the Thundershocking sword force has reached the 4th level. It's time to cultivate the Thunderlight sword technique. The complete version of the Thunderlight sword technique should have 12 moves, but the secret manual recorded 11 moves. Among them, the 1st to 9th moves were the basic moves, the 10th and 11th moves were the ultimate moves, and the missing 12th move was the killing move. During these 20 days, Chunzong would comprehend the Thunderlight sword technique when he was not cultivating. With a sword in hand, he immediately performed the basic moves of the Thunderlight sword technique. After 3 times, he had familiarized himself with the 1st to 9th moves of the Thunderlight sword technique and reached the small accomplishment realm. This speed was frighteningly fast. Sharpening the axe would not delay the work of cutting firewood. With a solid foundation, the subsequent cultivation would be faster. Chunzong did not pay attention to the 2 ultimate moves. Instead, he focused on the cultivation of the basic sword moves. Over and over again, he practiced them over and over again. The profound accomplishment realm. Then, the consummate realm. With the flash thunder-killing sword technique as his backing, it was easier to comprehend. Moreover, he had amazing control over his body, so the difficulty of cultivation was even lower. However, the imperceptible realm was not so easy to reach. Chunzong began to cultivate the 10th move, Thunderlight Skysweeping. When the sword was drawn, it was like a bolt of lightning streaking across the air with amazing power. The light was dazzling, illuminating the entire secret room. The entry realm. The small accomplishment realm. The profound accomplishment realm. The consummate realm. Where is Chunzong? He asked you to come out. Gao Luoshan barged into the pavilion with cold eyes and a manic tone. Young master is cultivating in seclusion. Under Gao Luoshan's cold and violent eyes, the 2 maids were as silent as cicadas in winter. They trembled and answered with difficulty. Ask him to come out. Gao Luoshan said angrily. After knowing that Chunzong had chosen the Thunderclap sword force and the Thunderlight sword technique, Gao Luoshan was furious. This was an invisible provocation to him. Get out of my way. Gao Luoshan also knew that the 2 maids did not dare to disturb Chunzong, who was cultivating in seclusion. He walked over directly. The 2 maids hurriedly backed away, otherwise their bones and tendons would be broken. Then, Gao Luoshan slammed his palm on the door of the secret room. With a bang, a muffled sound was heard, and the vibration was transmitted into the secret room. Who is it? Chunzong in the secret room was disturbed, so his tone was indifferent. I am Gao Luoshan, Chunzong. Get out here. Gao Luoshan's tone was even more aggressive. Gao Luoshan. After thinking for a while, Chunzong knew the purpose of Gao Luoshan's visit. With a smile on his face, he sheathed his sword and strode to the door of the secret room. When he opened the door, he saw Gao Luoshan standing at the door with a sullen face, glaring at him. If you want to fight, do it outside. Chunzong walked over Gao Luoshan and said. Gao Luoshan suddenly felt like he had punched nothing, which made him very unhappy. Young master. The 2 maids hurriedly bowed, worried that they would be punished. It's none of your business. Chunzong's words made them feel relieved. The courtyard of the pavilion where the 7 sword stars lived was very large. Chen Zong took the lead and stood in the middle of the courtyard. Gao Luoshan immediately rushed out and faced Chen Zong from a distance. Chen Zong, you should have chosen the extreme purple sword force instead of the thunderclap sword force. Gao Luoshan pulled out his ceremonial sword and pointed it at Chen Zong, his eyes full of anger. I like it. Chen Zong's answer made Gao Luoshan want to vomit blood. Don't think that just because you are one of the 7 sword stars, you have the corresponding strength. I will let you know the difference between us. Gao Luoshan was even more annoyed. I have heard such words more than once. Chen Zong responded calmly. It's useless to say more. As soon as he finished speaking, Gao Luoshan thrust his sword at him. The speed of the sword was extremely fast, like a flash of lightning breaking through the sky. Chen Zong recognized at a glance that this was the first move of the thunder sword technique. Gao Luoshan had been practicing it for a long time, so he had understood the essence of it and mastered it. Just in time. I will use you to practice my thunder sword technique. Chen Zong thought to himself. The same sword technique would often be different if different people practiced it. Perhaps it was closely related to the person's temperament and so on. The thunder sword technique that Gao Luoshan performed had a kind of madness. Chen Zong stabbed out with his sword. It was also the first move of the thunder sword technique. This move had an astonishing speed, like a flash of lightning tearing through the sky. It was decisive and fierce, but also contained a sense of dominance. As soon as Chen Zong attacked, Gao Luoshan's pupils trembled. He had been immersed in the thunder sword technique for a long time and was familiar with every move. When he saw Chen Zong perform it with his own eyes, there was an indescribable shock in his heart. How long had it been? It had only been a month. This cultivation speed, suddenly, Gao Luoshan's heart was filled with an indescribable jealousy. This jealousy turned into anger, making his sword even more violent. He changed his moves, unleashing one move after another. Every move was like a violent bolt of lightning, capable of shattering everything. However, in front of Chen Zong, this kind of sword light did not have the slightest effect. In terms of the power of the sword force, he was inferior to Chen Zong. In terms of the exquisiteness of the sword technique, he was inferior to Chen Zong. For a moment, Gao Luoshan was suppressed. In front of Chen Zong, he felt that his hands and feet were tied. It could not be helped. Both of them practiced the thunder sword technique. Although Gao Luoshan had been immersed in the thunder sword technique for a longer time than Chen Zong, in terms of understanding and mastery, he was inferior. It could not be helped. Chen Zong's talent in swordsmanship was outstanding, far surpassing Gao Luoshan's. Moreover, he had the flashing thunder sword technique as his backing. He had an advantage that Gao Luoshan did not have. Sword after sword, move after move, Gao Luoshan used all his strength and the thunder sword force without holding back. However, he was still unable to gain the upper hand. On the contrary, the feeling of being restrained became more and more intense. The battle with Gao Luoshan deepened Chen Zong's understanding of the thunder sword technique. Sword after sword, he forced Gao Luoshan to gradually lose the ability to counterattack and could only continuously parry. Damn it! Thunder sky sweeping! Gao Luoshan's anger exploded. He performed his ultimate move and slashed out with his sword. Intense thunder light shone like a bolt of lightning tearing through the sky, bringing with it a shockingly violent force. Break! Chen Zong slashed out with his sword. It was the 9th move of the thunder sword technique, the most powerful of the basic sword move. However, it was not as powerful as the thunder sky sweeping. Under Chen Zong's sword, however, it bloomed with shocking power. That was because the thunder sword force was powerful, and because Chen Zong's mastery of swordsmanship had reached the imperceptible realm. This sword attack directly hit the flaw in Gao Luoshan's thunder sky sweeping. The intense thunder light dissipated as if it was not powerful enough. It did not have any effect. Impossible! Gao Luoshan's voice was loud and sharp, showing his extreme shock. This move of his, thunder light sweeping space, had already been cultivated to the great perfection realm. Its might was extremely tyrannical, yet it was unexpectedly broken by the opponent's sword. This was an impossible matter. Even the earthly essence Sword Star, who was publicly recognized as the strongest of the 7 sword stars, would find it difficult to play it down so easily. It had only been a little more than a month, but Chen Zong's strength was much stronger than when he fought with Bai Yuxiao. This was completely unreasonable. Chapter 180. Gao Luoshan walked out of Chen Zong's courtyard dejectedly, his face full of frustration. Defeating Gao Luoshan was within Chen Zong's expectations. There was nothing to be proud of, so he continued his closed-door cultivation. Recently, the monsters in the Western Wilderness have become more active, said an elder of the Real Martial Alliance. 10 years have passed, so the number of monsters has increased. It's only natural that they're more active, said another elder. In the huge hall, there were a total of 13 seats. Each seat was unique and unforgettable. The 13 seats surrounded an oval-shaped table, and there was a person sitting on each seat. They all looked to be at least 40 years old. These were the 13 elders of the Real Martial Alliance. They were the 13 people with the highest status in the entire Eastern land. They controlled the Real Martial Alliance and the lives of many people. 10 years. It's about time to clean up the Western Wilderness. Since that's the case, let's pass down the order. Ask all the major forces to send warriors of the Qi refining realm into the Western Wilderness to clean up the monsters. After a few sentences, the decision was made. This was not the first time. Very quickly, the order was sent out to all the forces. The 4 great academies were naturally among them. Cleaning up the monsters in the Western Wilderness was a matter of life and death for the human race. Hundreds of years ago, the demonic beast army that destroyed the 3 kingdoms mainly came from the 100 Beast Mountain Range. The Western Wilderness was the 100 Beast Mountain Range's first stop after entering the Eastern land. There were a large number of demonic beasts living there, mainly level 1 to level 5 demonic beasts, which corresponded to Qi Blood Realm martial artists to level 9 Qi Refining Realm martial artists. The 4 academies and all the other major forces immediately took action. The Black Demon sect in the dark also received the news and took action. In the Real Sword Academy, all the disciples were gathered, regardless of whether they were official disciples or guardian disciples. This trip is very dangerous. If you're not careful, you'll die. So, you must be careful. Save your life first, then kill the enemy. An elder of the Real Sword Academy said loudly. Also, because it's very dangerous and you may die, you have one chance to back out. The True Sword Academy was gathering their disciples, and so were the other 3 academies. In the end, none of the core disciples of the True Sword Academy, the 7 Sword Stars, and the disciples on the Iron Sword ranking withdrew. There were more than 10 disciples who had gone through the 3rd turn of the Gene Training Realm who withdrew. As for the disciples who had gone through the 2nd and 1st turn of the Gene Training Realm, less than half of them withdrew. No one looked down on them, because it was very likely that they would never return. Survival was everyone's instinct. Even though Chen Zong knew it was dangerous, he still did not hesitate. Demonic beasts were the natural enemies of the human race. Practicing martial arts was to strengthen oneself, to pursue the path of the strong, and at the same time, to defend against demonic beasts. The destruction of the 3 great kingdoms was due to the demonic beast. In the current era of true martial arts, the threat of the demonic beasts was more important. Almost everyone would be instilled with similar ideas from the beginning of their martial arts training. Killing demonic beasts was the responsibility of every martial artist. There was no need for any general mobilization. Under the leadership of a few true martial realm elders, the group of disciples immediately set off in a grandiose manner to clear out the demonic beast. The fiend sword star, Fei Yuanji, gave Chen Zong a meaningful look, which made Chen Zong realize that this trip to the western wilderness might not be so simple. The Gene training realm warriors of the other 3 academies and other forces also began to move and set off for the western wilderness. The western wilderness belonged to the eastern continent. It was considered to be the western border of the eastern continent and connected to the main mountain range of the 100 Beast Mountain. Even if they hurried without stopping from the True Sword Academy, it would still take more than 10 days to get there. With a true martial realm elder leading the way and many powerful Qi refining realm disciples, they would not encounter any danger along the way. Of course, there would also not be any small thieves who did not know their place. During the rest period, the official disciples had their own groups, and the core disciples had their own group. There were even more subtle divisions between the group. This was not arranged by the elders, but by their own initiative. After all, different levels of cultivation and strength would lead to a kind of difference that came from the heart. For example, on the side of the official disciples, the 7 sword stars had their own small group. The disciples on the iron sword ranking also had their own small group. On the side of the core disciples, Chen Zong saw that the 7 sword sons had their own small group. The other disciples also had their own groups according to the difference in their levels of cultivation and strength. Brother Chen Zong, my name is Shi Chongqing. On the side of the core disciples, a person came over and greeted Chen Zong very politely. Chen Zong's keen perception told him that the person's cultivation was at the 5th turn of the Gene training realm, which was very strong. Brother Shi. Chen Zong stood up and clasped his hands. I've seen you fight a few times. Your potential is amazing. Shi Chongqing smiled and said, when I was at your level of cultivation, I couldn't compare to you at all. Brother, you flatter me. Although Chen Zong also thought so in his heart, he could not really say it out loud. I don't have anything else to do. I just came over to get to know you. Maybe soon you will catch up with me and then surpass me. Shi Chongqing was very talkative. So while you are still not as good as me, I quickly came over to make friends with you. It's my honor. Chen Zong smiled. Gao Luoshan looked on coldly, and so did the other sword stars. They already knew that Gao Luoshan was defeated by Chen Zong. On the side of the core disciples, Bai Yuxiao's cold eyes fell on Chen Zong like a sharp sword, wanting to pierce through Chen Zong. For Bai Yuxiao, hunting monsters in the western wilderness was also a good opportunity to kill Chen Zong. Even if Chen Zong's strength had increased, the gap between the early stage and the middle stage of the Gene training realm was very obvious. Moreover, not only was he completely familiar with the power of the 4th turn of the Gene training realm, his cultivation had also increased to the middle stage of the 4th turn of the Gene training realm. Compared to before, there was a great improvement. Chen Zong could feel Bai Yuxiao's cold and murderous gaze, but he ignored it. Along the way, Bai Yuxiao would look over from time to time. He was used to it. For Bai Yuxiao, hunting in the western wilderness was an opportunity. For Chen Zong, it was the same. The improvement of his cultivation and strength brought him more confidence. After chatting with Shi Chongqing for a while, Shi Chongqing returned to the group of core disciples. Then, other core disciples came to talk to Chen Zong. Compared to the other 6 sword stars, Chen Zong had entered the real sword academy for the shortest time, but he had improved the fastest. His potential was very amazing. As long as he did not die, he would soon catch up with them and then surpass them. It was not a bad thing to get to know him. Maybe they could rely on him in the future. But there were also some who were disdainful. Whether or not he can come back alive from the western wilderness is still a problem. This was the thought of some people. The potential he has shown now is amazing, but who knows if he will be able to do so in the future. This was the thought of another group of people. After all, many geniuses had amazing improvements in the early stages, but became mediocre in the later stages. Several elders gathered together and paid attention to all the movements around them. They also whispered to each other. After the break, everyone went on their way again. Rest, travel, and so on. During the break, Chern Zong would take out his sword and cultivate casually, but more often than not, he would meditate. Currently, the 3 sword arts he was practicing were the Earth-class lower-grade Severing Wind Sword Art, the Earth-class upper-grade Heavenly Light Sword Art, and the Earth-class Extreme-grade Lightning Sword Art. The Severing Wind Sword Art had reached the Minute Subtlety realm. Aside from the killer moves of the Heavenly Light Sword Art, everything else had also reached the Minute Subtlety realm. As for the killer move, Heavenly Light Cleaving Clouds, it was only 1 step away from reaching the Minute Subtlety realm. As for the strongest Earth-class Extreme-grade Lightning Sword Art, the 10th move had reached the Perfection realm. The 11th move had also reached the Perfection realm yesterday. His cultivation had reached the late stage of the 3rd transformation of the Qi refining realm. Overall, he was stronger. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 days had passed. They finally arrived at the town outside the Western Wilderness, also known as the Western Wilderness Town. The Western Wilderness Town was built by the Real Martial Arts Alliance. A team of Real Martial Arts Alliance warriors was stationed there, called the Western Wilderness Guard. There were more than 200 of them, and all of them were Qi refining realm warriors. So powerful! What a terrifying murderous aura! When the disciples of the True Sword Academy saw the Western Baron Guards, their expressions changed. So powerful! Chern Zong could feel that each of the Western Wilderness Guards' cultivation had surpassed the 3rd transformation of the Qi refining realm. Their murderous aura was extremely sharp. It was obvious that they had accumulated it through constant battles and killing of monsters. This kind of warrior was very scary. When fighting with them, one would constantly be attacked by their murderous aura. Those who did not have a strong enough mind and willpower would feel their whole body go numb and their limbs go soft. It would be difficult for them to use their full strength. Maybe the Western Wilderness Guard warriors were not geniuses, but if a 4th transformation of the Qi refining realm disciple of the Real Sword Academy were to fight with them, the probability of death would be more than 60%. I am Su Gaolin, the Deputy Commander of the Western Wilderness Guard. You must be from the Real Sword Academy. Your accommodations have already been arranged for you. A middle-aged man wearing dark red full-body armor and a long saber at his waist strode over. His eyes were cold and sharp. There was a long scar on the left side of his face, as if it had been torn open by a sharp claw. It made him look ferocious. His tone was even harsher. Chern Zong could feel a terrifying murderous aura and pressure from this person. This was a warrior at the late stage of the Qi refining realm. However, it was hard to tell what level of cultivation he was at. Lead the way, an elder said. He was a warrior at the true martial realm, so there was no need for him to be polite. This way, please. Su Gaolin's expression was naturally stiff, but it did not mean that his heart was the same. Soon, Su Gaolin led everyone to the accommodations that had been arranged. It was a very large building with many rooms. Everyone, in 5 days, we will officially enter the Western Wilderness to clear out the monsters. During these few days, please stay in your accommodations. Before Su Gaolin left, he said, remember, do not cause any bloodshed or disturb the order here. Otherwise, it will not look good for anyone. Don't worry, Deputy Commander, an elder said. Naturally, they would restrain their disciples. Thank you for your trouble. Although Su Gaolin's tone was stiff, he was still polite. There were more than 100 disciples of the Real Sword Academy. There were also many rooms, enough for everyone to live in. There would still be some left over. However, this was the residence of the Real Sword Academy. Naturally, it would not be arranged for anyone else. Warriors from other forces had also arrived. The disciples of the Sky Martial Academy, the Giant Blade Academy, and the Fiery Blood Academy had all gathered. Chapter 181. What a bunch of trash! You can't even block 3 of my moves. How dare you call yourselves geniuses? You're just a bunch of trash. The triangular-eyed teenager had a mocking expression on his face. His words were sharp and included everyone around him, but no one dared to say anything. After all, the strength he had just displayed was indeed very strong. Don't be too proud. I'm just an ordinary disciple of the Tianwu Academy. Defeating me is nothing. The defeated person retorted with a red face, If you really have the ability, then go and challenge our Tianwu Academy's 10 warriors. Sure, call them over. Watch how I defeat them one by one. The triangular-eyed youngster continued to sneer. Shortly after, he swept his gaze across the crowd and said, Not only the so-called 10 warriors of the Tianwu Academy, there are also the 9 treasured blades, the 8 war soldiers, the 7 sword stars, and so on. I will accept all of them. I will show you that the people of the genius training camp are the real geniuses. The attack range of this sentence was wider and more accurate. It directly included the geniuses of the 4 academies. It was a complete provocation. Coincidentally, Chernzong happened to pass by and heard this sentence. However, he had no intention of making a move. The triangular-eyed teenager's attack just now was not weak, but in Chernzong's eyes it was nothing. Just because Chernzong did not make a move, it did not mean that the others were indifferent. I'm a disciple of the Fiery Blood Academy. I'm not one of the 8 warriors, but I'm ranked 40th on the bloodshed ranking. A young man wearing a sleeveless martial robe with bulging muscles on his arms, as if they were cast from iron, strode out. Every step he took brought with him an astonishing aura. He directly locked onto the triangular-eyed young man, causing his expression to change and become serious. Take my punch. The Fiery Blood Academy disciple's footsteps suddenly quickened. Like a raging bull, he charged forward and punched out with all his might. His tyrannical strength was concentrated in that punch, causing the air around it to explode. The punching pressure caused the triangular-eyed teenager to be unable to breathe. Watch me defeat you with one punch. The triangular-eyed teenager felt a great pressure, but he had already made a threat before. If he backed down now, it would be equivalent to slapping himself in the face. He immediately gathered all his strength, mobilized his inner strength, and fiercely punched out. With a loud bang, the 2 fists collided, and a muffled sound was heard. The Fiery Blood Academy disciple's arm was as firm as a rock, and his body did not move, nor did he take a step back. On the other hand, the triangular-eyed teenager's arm trembled, and he could no longer clench his fist. He unconsciously loosened his grip, and his whole body leaned back. Despite his best efforts, he could not stop himself from being pushed back. Take another punch. The Fiery Blood Academy disciple suddenly took a step forward. His aura was astonishing, and he threw out another punch. This punch was something that the triangular-eyed youth from the genius training camp couldn't block at all. He was immediately sent flying, blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. How dare you look down on the 8 fighters of our Blazing Blood Academy? What a joke! The Blazing Blood Academy disciple sneered. Oh, you think you're very impressive? Then let me see what you're capable of. A light voice, like a falling leaf, slowly drifted down, circled in the wind. Immediately after, a figure crossed the distance of more than 10 meters and charged towards the Fiery Blood Academy disciple at an astonishing speed. Although the figure seemed light, it carried a kind of sharpness. The Fiery Blood Academy disciple did not even have time to react. He was immediately hit in the chest, and his strong body was sent flying, accompanied by a muffled sound that sounded like the beating of a drum. Only then did the crowd see clearly that there was another person in front of them. He was wearing a short green robe, and his long hair cascaded down his shoulders. He looked handsome, but his eyes were as cold as a knife. Just a glance was enough to send chills down people's spines. Who is he? This was a question that many people had in mind. Chern Zong was also a bit surprised because the speed at which this person appeared was very fast, like an arrow leaving the bow. However, there was also a kind of lightness to it, like a falling leaf being blown by the wind. Senior Brother Liu. The triangular-eyed teenager stood up and ran to the side of the green-robed teenager, looking very submissive. Yes. The green-robed teenager only glanced at the triangular-eyed teenager and ignored him. My name is Lu Qingye, an outer camp disciple of the Genius Training Camp. I am ranked 18th on the outer genius ranking. Who else wants to fight with me? His voice was calm, but it contained a kind of shocking aura. The Genius Training Camp was divided into two camps, the outer camp and the outer camp. The highest level of cultivation in the outer camp was the third transformation of the Force Training Realm, while the lowest level of cultivation in the inner camp was the fourth transformation of the Force Training Realm. This was similar to the four academies in that the outer camp and the outer camp each had their own ranking. Perhaps it was due to the small number of people, but there were only 20 names on the outer camp list. However, every disciple who was on the list was extremely powerful. For example, Lu Qingye was ranked 18th, but his cultivation had reached the peak of the third cycle of the Qi refining realm. Chern Zong could tell from the aura of his attacks that Lu Qingye was practicing an upper-grade earth-level cultivation technique, and had already reached the fourth level. He did not know the name of the technique, but he could tell from the aura that Lu Qingye was practicing. It should be light and sharp, just like the aura of his attacks. It was said that on the outer genius ranking, there were the three aces of the outer genius training camp. In terms of level, they were like the 7 sword stars of the True Sword Academy. In terms of strength, it was not clear. However, Lu Qingye was ranked 18th, but he was able to injure the 40th on the bloodshed ranking of the Ferocious Blood Academy with one palm. The bloodshed ranking of the Ferocious Blood Academy had a total of 64 names. No one fought again. After all, at this time, the truly powerful people were all in seclusion, adjusting their condition, and preparing for the hunt in the western wilderness. As for Chern Zong, he only came out for a walk after his cultivation to feel the atmosphere and adjust himself. With Chern Zong gone, Lu Qingye might be strong, but in Zhang Xian's eyes, he was nothing much. There was no need for him to make a move. However, through Lu Qingye, he could tell that the overall strength of the disciples of the Genius Training Camp was indeed not weak. Every day, there would be conflicts between the 4 academies and the Genius Training Camp. Fortunately, there were restraints and there were no bloodshed. As for deaths, there were even fewer. However, after so many conflicts, there was an oppressive atmosphere in the air. In addition, there were also some demonic beasts that rushed out of the Western Wilderness and were killed by the Western Wilderness Guard. However, there were also a few Western Wilderness Guards who died under the claws of demonic beasts, making the atmosphere even colder. Today was the 5th day, and also the day when everyone would enter the Western Wilderness to hunt demonic beasts. The disciples of the various forces gathered outside the Western Wilderness town, which was the border of the Western Wilderness. They were divided according to the different forces. Among these forces, the 4 academies and the Genius Training Camp were the strongest. The others were like vassals. However, there were also some outstanding disciples who were not weak. Other than the 7 sword stars and 7 sword sons of the True Sword Academy, Chern Zong also saw the 10 warriors and 10 martial heroes of the Sky Martial Academy, the 9 treasured blades and 9 heavenly blades of the Giant Blade Academy, the 8 war soldiers and 8 war generals of the Ferocious Blood Academy, and the Inner Genius Training Camp disciples on the Inner and Outer Genius ranking, as well as the Outer Camp 3 aces and the Inner Camp 3 venerables. Every one of them had different expressions and auras, but they were all like dragons and phoenixes among men. At this moment, Chernzong felt sharp gazes from the genius training camp. One of the sharpest gazes was carrying a long sword on his back. It was the outer camp sword master. His gaze was as sharp as a sword, as if he wanted to pierce through Chernzong. Another one had the same gaze, but it felt different. It was like a sharp blade cutting through flesh. It was the saber master. The third one was the palm master. His gaze was heavy and oppressive. Chernzong was not the only one who was swept by their gazes. The official disciples of the other 4 academies were not spared either. His sharp gaze carried with it the pressure of his spiritual will. The invisible collision seemed like it was going to burst out countless sparks. This time, we will enter the western wilderness to hunt demonic beasts for a month. After a month, you can bring out the materials and cores from the demonic beasts and exchange them for money. An elder of the True Martial Alliance said in a clear voice, "The True Martial Alliance will buy the demonic beasts for 30% higher than the market price." 30% higher was indeed a good price. It could also be considered as a reward for hunting demonic beasts. After all, a warrior's cultivation required a lot of resources. Where would most of the resources come from? Buying them with money was the most direct way. As for the danger of life and death, everyone who dared to come here would consider this. There is nothing more to say. I hope you can kill as many demonic beasts as possible and protect yourselves at the same time. You will prosper, the elder of the True Martial Alliance said at last. Remember, the sharpness of the sword is unstoppable. The elder of the True Sword Academy said seriously to the disciples, but you must also learn to protect yourselves. Only by staying alive can you kill more demonic beasts. Yes, sir, the disciples of the True Sword Academy replied seriously. We, the people of the Fiery Blood Academy, worship fresh blood. A battle of life and death is what we yearn for. Remember, this time, it is not only about killing demonic beasts, it is also a kind of training for you. If you come out alive, you will be reborn. The elder of the Fiery Blood Academy spoke with a hint of fanaticism. That man is Chernzong of the True Sword Academy. He dared to kill people of the Tyrant Martial Alliance. If we have the chance, we will kill him immediately, some of the disciples of the Genius Training Camp said to the others. The Tyrant Martial Alliance was founded by the Tyrant Martial Alliance's prodigy. It was more or less related to the True Martial Alliance, and could use the True Martial Alliance's intelligence network. If they wanted to investigate, it would not be too difficult to find out Chernzong's identity, especially after so much time had passed. However, Chernzong was a disciple of the True Sword Academy and one of the 7 Sword Stars. The True Martial Alliance could not interfere directly. The influence of the Tyrant Martial Alliance alone was not enough to make the True Sword Academy give up on Chernzong. If they wanted to deal with Chernzong, they would have to find the right opportunity. Hunting demonic beasts in the western wilderness was one such opportunity. Speaking of which, on the surface, they were hunting demonic beasts in the western wilderness, but they were secretly killing other competitors. Eliminating dissidents and weakening competitors was always human nature. Martial artists strengthened this nature even more. There were more than 1,000 Chi refining realm warriors from the 4 great academies, the Genius Training Camp, and many other forces. More than 1,000 people rushed into the western wilderness. They formed groups according to the different forces and headed in different directions. I wonder how many people will not make it out alive. Chapter 182. The Western Wasteland lived up to its name. At first glance, the first impression was that it was barren. As the number 1 battlefield of the Kingdom era, the ground here was dark red. It was formed by the blood of countless people, and it gave people a feeling that it was endless. The Western Wasteland was a wasteland that connected the 100 Beast Mountain Range and the eastern continent. Moving together was undoubtedly the safest, but there was also a downside. It was too messy. Whenever a beast appeared, it would be killed immediately. There was no chance to attack, not to mention obtaining beast materials or cores. Gradually, they separated from the original big group into small groups of 2s and 3s. There were also some who were alone. Chunzong chose to travel alone. The sword light was so sharp that it seemed to fall from the sky. The sword light contained the mysteries of the heavenly light sword art. The middle rank 3 beast in front of him was directly pierced through between its eyebrows and died instantly. Chunzong skillfully cut open the beast's body with a few slashes. However, he did not find any cores. Every demonic beast had precious materials on them, but Chunzong only wanted to retrieve their inner cores. Because inner cores were small, they were easy to carry around. After all, the purpose of entering this place was to clear out demonic beasts. Carrying so many demonic beast materials on him would only be a burden. Most of the beasts that lived in the outskirts of the western wasteland were rank 1 and rank 2 beasts. They usually lived in groups, and when their numbers reached a certain level, they were enough to threaten a gene training realm warrior. The middle part of the western wasteland consisted mostly of rank 3 beasts. If one was unlucky, one might encounter rank 4 beasts. As for most rank 4 beasts and rank 5 beasts, they lived in the deeper parts of the western wasteland, close to the 100-beast mountain range. Moving forward, Chunzong saw a human warrior's body that was torn into pieces. From the remnants of his clothes, he could tell that he was a disciple of the Sky Martial Academy. However, he was also a sword warrior. There was a precious iron sword beside him, and it was stained with blood. Chunzong picked up the sword, wiped off the blood on it, and hung it on his waist. The precious iron sword was sharp, but after a month of life and death battles, it was hard to guarantee that it would not be damaged. To a sword warrior, the sword in his hand was very important. Once it was damaged, it would affect his strength. A small difference could decide life and death. I wonder if it's possible to wield a sword in each hand and perform different sword techniques? Chunzong suddenly had an idea. The reason why he practiced sword techniques, palm techniques, fist techniques, and so on was so that he could be more flexible in battle and have more tricks up his sleeves. However, if he could use 2 swords to perform different sword techniques, not to mention the power, at least he would be more flexible in battle, making it harder for his opponent to guard against him. Pulling out the sword with both hands, Chunzong tried to wield it. He found that it was not difficult to wield it casually, but it was not satisfactory. It looked good when wielding it, but once it was used in a battle, it would be difficult to exert much of its power. It might even affect the swords and become a joke. However, Chunzong was tough. The more challenging something was, the more he wanted to try it. Pausing for the time being, he continued to practice his dual swords. With his solid foundation and outstanding talent, his grasp of the dual swords rapidly improved. Gradually, he began to take form, and he was already able to use the same basic 18 move. One sword chopped and the other stabbed. Both swords arrived at the same time, which was quite interesting. After practicing for another 10 times, Chunzong felt that he had reached a bottleneck, which required real combat. Not long after, Chunzong encountered a low-rank LV3 demonic beast, which was a good target to practice his sword techniques on. In the western wasteland, demonic beasts were the most abundant. If you did not go looking for them, they might come looking for you. It was a black wolf, very tall and strong, with a ferocious look. It completely regarded Chunzong as its food. Chunzong's power was enough to kill it within seconds, but he didn't. Instead, he used his dual swords to perform the basic 18 moves, using the demonic beast's power to practice his dual swords. The power of the basic 18 moves was not strong at all, but it was very practical. Chunzong had been practicing it for a long time, and it had long been ingrained in his bones, becoming an instinct. However, it was much more difficult to perform it with dual swords, especially in a real battle, where the shortcomings were immediately exposed. However, Chunzong's learning ability was very fast. Not long after, he was able to use his dual swords freely, using all of the basic 18 move. After a few strikes, the low-rank LV3 demonic beast was immediately killed. I need to find a stronger demonic beast to practice my sword techniques, Chunzong thought to himself. After all, a low-rank LV3 demonic beast's power was limited, and the pressure it brought was also limited. It could only allow him to reach this level in his dual swords technique. If he wanted to continue to improve, he would need more pressure. Luckily, this low-rank LV3 demonic beast had an inner core. The inner core of a LV3 demonic beast was different from that of a LV2 demonic beast. The power it contained was not the blood essence of the demonic beast, but the violent power of the demonic beast. Naturally, its value was higher, easily exceeding 100,000 white jade coins. Using his dual swords to fight the demonic beast, Chunzong was almost injured several times. Fortunately, he would not be arrogant enough to find a LV4 demonic beast, so his improvement was very obvious. Using both swords to perform the severing wind swordsmanship, but the moves are different. In front of him were two high-rank LV3 demonic beasts, which were stronger than the average third turn of the training realm martial artist. Chunzong was fighting against two demonic beasts at the same time. With both swords in hand, he immediately performed different swordsmanship. The thunderclap sword force also split into two and poured into his arms, performing different sword moves. The dual swords turned into an invisible wind that could cut off all attack. They also contained the sharpness of the swords and the sharpness of the thunderclap sword force. Under normal circumstances, two high-rank LV3 demonic beasts together would not be enough to kill Chunzong. However, the problem was that Chunzong practiced dual swords technique. Even if he could perform different sword moves of the severing wind swordsmanship at the same time, he would not be able to perform 100% of the move. Otherwise, he would lose control. For now, he could only perform about 30% of the move's power, which was enough for Chunzong to deal with the two high-rank LV3 demonic beasts. One sword for the first move, one for the third move. One sword for the second move, one sword for the seventh move. One sword for the fifth move, one sword for the ninth move. Every move of the severing wind swordsmanship was performed by Chunzong again and again. Chunzong had already practiced this swordsmanship to the imperceptible realm. It was extremely profound and he had completely grasped the mysteries of it. Now, he only needed to familiarize himself with the different moves of the dual swords so that they would not interfere with each other. 40%, 50%. I've reached my limit again, Chunzong said to himself. He changed his sword moves and killed the two demonic beasts at the same time. Chunzong did not know the strength of the low-rank LV4 demonic beasts, but they were definitely stronger than the average fourth turn of the training realm martial artist. The difference between a fourth turn of the training realm martial artist and a third turn of the training realm martial artist was very obvious. When a martial artist reached the fourth turn of the training realm, his internal strength could spread out of his body and cover his palm or weapon, which would obviously increase the power. The inner chi attack of a martial artist in the early stages of the force training realm was actually a type of impact. The impact was formed by increasing the inner chi in the body. When the inner chi hit the target, a small portion of the inner chi would rush out and cause more damage to the target. However, that was passive and only a small portion of the inner chi would be released. When a martial artist reached the middle stage of the training realm, his internal strength could really flow out of his body and cover his palm. Not only could it increase the power of his palm, it could also form a layer of protection. If the internal strength covered his body, it would be like wearing a layer of internal strength armor. Of course, it was very difficult to do that and it consumed a lot of energy. When Bai Yuxiao had broken through to the fourth turn of the training realm, his strength had become even stronger. However, in reality, he had not mastered the ability to externalize his internal strength. Otherwise, Chen Zong would be in trouble. If he did not look for LV4 demonic beasts, he could look for more LV3 demonic beasts. 3 demonic beasts. 4 demonic beasts. 5 demonic beasts. Using both swords to perform the severing wind swordsmanship, he gradually increased his mastery from 50% to 60% and then to 70%. The higher the mastery, the more difficult it was to increase the mastery. Around him, there were 9 LV3 demonic beasts. Each of them emitted a terrifying and violent aura. They were extremely ferocious and surrounded Chen Zong. Their cold and merciless gazes were as if they wanted to tear Chen Zong to shreds. "Come." Chen Zong smiled. His 2 swords moved gently, as if nothing had happened. The demonic beasts launched a surprise attack from 9 different directions. Their violent aura and intense killing intent brought about a terrifying pressure. This pressure was enough to defeat Yan Feng, who was once the number 1 on the metal sword leaderboard. Chen Zong was not afraid at all. His cultivation had reached the late stage of the 3rd turn of the training realm. His willpower was extremely condensed. Using both swords, he performed different moves of the severing wind swordsmanship to block and intercept the attacks from the demonic beast. At the same time, he performed the 8 directional 4 extreme steps to wander around a small area and avoid the attacks from the demonic beast. With his outstanding senses, Chen Zong could clearly sense the attacks coming from all directions even without using his eyes. He could identify them and dodge and counterattack accordingly. The pressure from the 9 LV3 demonic beasts was indeed very strong. It was a good training experience. Not long after, Chen Zong performed the severing wind swordsmanship with both swords and its power reached 100%. Die! Both swords flashed, and in an instant, he executed 4 and 5 strikes respectively, killing the 9 LV3 demonic beasts. His luck was not bad. He obtained 2 dawn. The dawn of LV3 demonic beasts had obvious differences in their grades and values. For example, if a LV3 dawn was worth 100,000 white jade coins, then a LV3 dawn would be worth 200,000 white jade coins, and a LV3 upper dawn would be worth 300,000 white jade coins. Killing demonic beasts to reduce the number of demonic beasts in the western wilderness, he could sell the dawn, and at the same time, he could train his swordsmanship. It was killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Of course, the prerequisite was that he did not put himself in a life-threatening situation. Now that the severing wind swordsmanship has reached its peak, it's time for the heavenly light swordsmanship. The severing wind swordsmanship was a LV3 earth swordsmanship, while the heavenly light swordsmanship was a LV3 earth swordsmanship. Not only was it more powerful, it was also more difficult. However, Chen Zong had already cultivated the heavenly light swordsmanship to the minute subtlety realm. The only thing he lacked was the familiarity of his body. In front of him was an upper LV3 demonic beast. It looked like a ferocious tiger. Its entire body was black, and there were black bone spurs on its back. It looked very scary. The aura it emitted was very strong, like a surging tide. It was abnormally violent. Compared to the upper LV3 demonic beasts he had encountered before, it was on a completely different level. Chen Zong knew that this was a special upper LV3 demonic beast. It was like a LV3 demonic beast overlord. You should have 100% dawn, right? Chen Zong said with a smile. As if he had seen his prey, he leaped up and charged forward as light as the wind. His 2 swords swung, and they immediately transformed into 2 similarly sharp sword lights with different trajectories that instantly attacked. Chapter 183. Skylight Cloud Surge. Skylight Cloud Break. The two swords each performed a different sword move, turning into a strong light that slashed down. One sword moved with the clouds, forming a large area. The other sword turned into a strong skylight, like a ray of light at the beginning of the world, instantly tearing the clouds apart and slashing down. No matter how strong this level 3 monster overlord was, it could not block this sword and was instantly killed, split into two. Chen Zong could feel the pure and violent power contained in the inner core in his hand. It was very vigorous. The value of a rank 3 demonic beast overlord's inner core was much higher than that of a rank 3 demonic beast overlord's inner core. Chen Zong estimated that if he were to sell the inner core that he had obtained so far, he would be able to easily obtain over 1,000,000 jade money. Especially when the true martial alliance was buying it at a premium of 30%, it would be even more. Circulating his cultivation method and recovering his inner strength, he reached the late stage of the third cycle of the Qi training realm. Warriors who had reached the late stage of the Force training realm had already ventured deeper into the western wilderness. Their opponents were level 5 demonic beasts. After all, unless they encountered a large group of level 4 demonic beasts, a small number of level 4 demonic beasts were not enough for them to kill. There were more than 1,000 Qi training realm warriors who entered the western wasteland this time. More than 100 of them were at the late stage of the Qi training realm, more than 400 were at the middle stage of the Qi training realm, and the rest were at the early stage of the Qi training realm. Different cultivation levels and different strength were destined to move in different areas. Letting a late-stage Qi training realm warrior kill a level 3 or level 4 monster was a waste of talent. Letting a early-stage Qi training realm warrior kill a level 4 or level 5 monster was suicide. Even a level 3 monster overlord is not my opponent. Maybe I can find a level 4 monster overlord, Chen Zong thought. This was not blindness, but a kind of confidence in his own strength. A level 3 overlord demonic beast was very strong. Even a fourth cycle of the Jin training realm martial artist would have to spend some effort to kill it. Chen Zong was able to kill a level 3 overlord demonic beast, so it was not difficult. In comparison, his strength should not be weaker than a normal fourth cycle of the Jin training realm martial artist. However, the truth had yet to be confirmed. Finding a Class 4 lower rank demonic beast as an opponent was undoubtedly a good idea. Chen Zong's purpose in entering the western wilderness was not only to kill as many demonic beasts as possible and weaken their power, but also to use the demonic beasts to train himself. Martial artists were like swords. They could only take shape after being tempered thousands of times. They could only be sharpened after being carefully polished. At that time, their sharpness would be peerless and illuminate the world. Only then would they be invincible. While searching for Class 4 lower-tier demonic beasts, he would also kill Class 3 demonic beasts when he encountered one. He didn't encounter a Class 4 lower-rank demonic beast, but he did encounter Bai Yuxiao. Chen Zong, I was looking for you. I didn't expect you to come to me on your own accord. This time, you will definitely die. When Bai Yuxiao saw Chen Zong, he was slightly startled at first. Then, he sneered. The murderous intent in his eyes was sharp and fierce. The murderous aura was surging. Perhaps it was because he had killed many demonic beasts, but it was getting more and more intense. Like a gust of wind, Chen Zong's black hair fluttered. If that's the case, then let's end this, Chen Zong said unhurriedly. Under Bai Yuxiao's fierce, murderous intent, he didn't change his expression at all. Instead, he walked towards Bai Yuxiao step by step. Ha ha! Bai Yuxiao couldn't help but laugh when he saw that Chen Zong didn't plan to escape. Instead, he approached him. However, this was also what he wanted. He was worried that Chen Zong would run away and chase him. If he was seen by others, it would be difficult to kill him. Besides, this was the western wilderness. There were many demonic beasts. If Chen Zong wanted to escape, he might be able to get away. It would be best if he didn't leave. Die. As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Yuxiao's body stretched out. Like an arrow leaving the bow, he shot out at an extremely fast speed. His sharp sword was unsheathed and turned into a cold light, piercing through the air. Shocking murderous intent was condensed in this sword. The sword light was also dyed purple, like a purple meteor. With the sword's momentum, it was unstoppable. Chen Zong could clearly feel that compared to before, Bai Yuxiao's speed was much faster and his aura was much sharper. Compared to before, Bai Yuxiao's strength had increased by leaps and bounds. Just this sword alone was enough to pose a great threat to Chen Zong. It was several times more powerful than a level 3 demonic overlord. The same extreme purple sword force and the same sword soaring sky. However, there was a huge difference in power between a third turn and a fourth turn. This sword was also Bai Yuxiao's full strength. Perhaps it wasn't the strongest move in the soaring sky swordsmanship, but it was the fastest. In order to prevent Chen Zong from escaping, and to avoid any sudden changes, he had to kill Chen Zong as soon as possible. Taking a deep breath, Chen Zong got rid of all distracting thoughts. His heart's eye and hands inexplicable aura spread out. The thunderclap sword force surged. In terms of the purity of his inner strength, Chen Zong was not inferior to Bai Yuxiao. The only difference was that his inner strength couldn't come out of his body. The sword turned into a flash of lightning, tearing the sky apart. It was the thunderclap swordsmanship. Chen Zong didn't use two swords. Therefore, in Bai Yuxiao's eyes, they were backup swords. It was normal for him to do so. For example, Bai Yuxiao himself carried a precious iron sword on his back, just in case. The flash of lightning and the purple sword light collided. Chen Zong immediately felt the terrible power contained in Bai Yuxiao's sword. That power was tough and sharp. It went through the sword in his hand and went straight to his palm, as if it wanted to shatter his palm and arm. It was very powerful. That was inner strength. The inner strength that could be manifested externally was the real power of inner strength. It was incomparable to the initial stage of Qi refining realm. The power is too strong. It's not good to face it head-on. Chen Zong thought to himself. He immediately changed his move. He turned into a flash of lightning and attacked Bai Yuxiao from all directions. Combined with the 8 directional 4-pole steps, his footsteps wandered and his figure changed. He appeared around Bai Yuxiao. In the blink of an eye, it was as if there were many Chen Zongs surrounding Bai Yuxiao, attacking him. Insignificant skill. Bai Yuxiao sneered, but his heart was trembling. If he had just broken through to the 4th turn of Qi refining realm and hadn't familiarized himself with the 4th turn of Qi refining realm, he would have found it difficult to deal with Chen Zong's attack. If he was careless, he might even be injured by Chen Zong. However, it was different now. Due to the accumulation of the 3rd turn of Qi refining realm, his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. He had reached the late stage of the 4th turn of Qi refining realm. Moreover, he was completely familiar with the power of his body. He could fully utilize the power of his inner strength. A normal lower level 4 demonic beast was no match for him. With a swing of his sword, the purple sword light tore through the air and shattered Chen Zong's lightning. The purple sword light then condensed and turned into a flash of light. It pierced towards Chen Zong with an astonishing momentum. The power of every strike was so strong. Lightning skimming. Chen Zong performed the ultimate move of the lightning swordsmanship. His sword turned into a flash of silver lightning that tore through the sky. The power was condensed, and it carried an astonishing and domineering power. It also had the sharpness of the sword as it attacked Bai Yuxiao. Bai Yuxiao had fought with Gao Luoshan before, so he was very clear about the moves and changes of the lightning swordsmanship. However, when he fought with Chen Zong, especially after seeing Chen Zong perform the ultimate move of lightning skimming, he was even more surprised. Compared with Gao Luoshan, Chen Zong's lightning swordsmanship was much more advanced. It gave him a feeling that what Chen Zong performed was the real lightning swordsmanship, while what Gao Luoshan performed was just a facet. Bai Yuxiao could not help but sigh. This Chen Zong was really a genius. Unfortunately, going against the family would only lead to a dead end. No matter how talented he was, it was useless. Kill. Sword Qi soaring. Terrifying sword Qi shot out. Especially when Lin Fan's inner strength was externalized, its power was even more tyrannical. Every sword seemed to be able to shatter a mountain, causing Chen Zong's body to tremble and feel a chill run down his spine. He held the sword hilt with his left hand and performed the severing wind 13 strikes. His sword hit the joint of the sword Qi soaring. The strong power collided and was about to break it. However, with the external force of his internal force, the sword Qi soaring became more tenacious and was difficult to break. However, the severing wind 13 strikes also played a role. It made the sword Qi soaring pause for a moment. Skylight breaking through the clouds. The sword in his right hand chopped down. The strong light tore through all obstacles. With amazing power, it chopped towards Bai Yuxiao. It was magnificent and majestic. The sudden change made Bai Yuxiao's expression change. He did not expect that Chen Zong's second sword was not a backup. It could be used to attack with two swords. Moreover, it was a different swordsmanship. Bai Yuxiao reacted quickly. He performed his body movement and immediately retreated to distance himself. Chen Zong followed and rushed forward. The sword in his left hand swept across the sky. The sword in his right hand also performed the same move, but the trajectory was different. One sword was straight while the other was curved. At the same time, they attacked Bai Yuxiao from two different angles. It felt as if two people were attacking from two different angles. Bai Yuxiao was very strong, but Chen Zong was not weak either. Especially in this situation, he was even more powerful. Bai Yuxiao had to use his sword. After breaking the sword light, he immediately dodged the other sword light. Chen Zong's sword came again. The sword in his left hand was still sweeping across the sky. The sword in his right hand was performing the second unique move of the lightning swordsmanship, lightning striking wood. The lightning striking wood was a unique move that focused on speed. It was extremely fast, but in terms of power, it was not strong enough. The potential of the lightning striking wood had not been fully explored. The lightning striking wood not only had the amazing speed of the lightning striking wood, but also showed the power of the lightning striking wood. In ancient times, there was a saying that the lightning striking wood was when the lightning striking wood fell from the sky and smashed a huge tree that had been growing for thousands of years. It should be known that the trees that had been growing for thousands of years were not only huge, but also had amazing vitality. A single lightning striking wood was enough to show the power of the lightning striking wood. When the sword was performed, Bai Yuxiao felt as if he had become a tree, waiting for the lightning striking wood to strike him down. This sword had reached the realm of imperceptibility. It was a fatal threat to Bai Yuxiao. Bai Yuxiao had never expected that he would not be able to kill Chen Zong even though he had already reached the late stage of the fourth cycle of the Qi refining realm and was familiar with all his powers. Chen Zong's strength was so strong that even he felt threatened. What a scary guy. Bai Yuxiao sighed from the bottom of his heart. Charging force skill? Soaring sword. At the critical moment, Bai Yuxiao burst out with all his strength. His extreme purple sword force rushed out violently. With this, the power of the soaring sword was more than doubled. This sword seemed to be able to pierce through the sky. Extreme lightning strike. Chen Zong did not hold back as the lightning sword force surged. Chapter 184. Like a bolt of lightning, it tore through the sky and smashed everything. With incomparable fierceness and overbearingness, It charged towards Bai Yuxiao as if nothing could stop it. Under the effect of the rushing strength skill, Chen Zong's sword rushed to the sky. It would not stop until it pierced a hole in the sky. Two extremely powerful sword radiances collided in an instant. Everything in front of him turned black and white. He could not hear anything, as if he had lost his hearing. This feeling disappeared in the blink of an eye. The two sword radiances sputtered after the collision. The momentum was turbulent. The extremely powerful force hit Chen Zong's body and went straight to his internal organs. It was as if a terrible sharp sword was about to cut his internal organs into pieces. Bai Yuxiao was also pushed back by Chen Zong's powerful sword. He kept retreating, leaving deep footprints with each step. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. His muscles and bones were numb, and he felt as if they were about to fall apart. The collision of the extreme flash thunder sword and the rushing strength skill was equally matched. The rebounding force injured both of them directly. Chen Zong forcibly stopped himself from retreating. He endured the pain of his internal organs being cut and exerted force on his feet. As the dust flew, his body shot out like an arrow from the bow. Die! The long sword broke through the air and turned into a speck of starlight. Like a flying star chasing after the moon, it pierced towards Bai Yuxiao's forehead. Bai Yuxiao only felt a chill in between his eyebrows. His whole body was cold and his hair stood on end. But his strength was superb. He immediately counterattacked with his sword. But once he did so, his injury was aggravated and he was in great pain. I have to go first. After blocking Chen Zong's sword, Bai Yuxiao wanted to retreat. He thought that he could kill Chen Zong this time, but he did not expect that both of them would be injured. Now he was seriously injured. On the other hand, Chen Zong seemed to be able to fight again. If he continued to fight, the result would be unpredictable. Maybe he could kill Chen Zong, but it would not be easy for him. In a place like the Western Wilderness, once the injury was too serious, the possibility of death was very high. Bai Yuxiao wanted to kill Chen Zong, but he did not want to lose his life. He should retreat first and look for a chance to kill Chen Zong later. With a thought, Bai Yuxiao channeled his inner strength and used his body movement technique, flying far away. Chen Zong didn't give chase. He had used the extreme flash thunder kill sword, which had consumed all of his inner force. He couldn't catch up. Moreover, even if he caught up, it would be difficult to kill Bai Yuxiao. The strength of a late-stage fourth cycle cultivator was indeed very strong, especially for a genius like Bai Yuxiao. His strength was already superior to many other late-stage fourth cycle cultivators. Although not being able to kill Bai Yuxiao was a pity, it also made Chen Zong realize his current strength. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, the inner strength that was wreaking havoc in his body was also spat out. Only then did the tearing pain lessen and slowly disappear. Once a martial artist's cultivation reached the fourth cycle of the energy training realm, they would be able to manifest their inner strength externally. Thus, they would be able to practice some secret techniques, such as the charging force technique that Bai Yuxiao had used. As the name implied, it was a technique that allowed one to channel one's inner strength in an instant and release it at an astonishing speed and in a turbulent manner. It was more than twice as fast as channeling one's inner strength through cultivation method. When used to perform martial arts, the instantaneous and powerful output would greatly increase the impact of the martial art. It was especially suitable for performing martial arts moves such as stabbing. That was why the soaring sword was so powerful under the effect of the charging force technique. If it weren't for the extreme flash thunder kill sword, Chen Zong wouldn't have been able to resist it. He took out the energy recovery pill and consumed it to recover his inner strength. As for his internal injuries, he could recover quickly with his pure yang body. After a while, his injuries were alleviated. However, there was still a long way to go before he could fully recover. After all, this time, his internal organs were severely injured. If it were other martial artists, they would need to take the pill and rest for a few days before they could fully recover. Chen Zong's recovery speed was already fast enough. After that, his inner strength also recovered. After recovering, Chen Zong felt that his inner strength had increased a little. If only I had the 5th level of the Thunderclap sword force, my cultivation speed would be even faster, Chen Zong thought to himself. Ever since he had broken through to the force training realm, Chen Zong had been training every day. Especially after changing his cultivation method twice, Chen Zong could clearly feel the importance of a high-level cultivation method. Perhaps for other martial artists, a high-level cultivation method would bring about faster cultivation speed and recovery speed, as well as thicker and purer inner strength. However, for Chen Zong, in addition to the above points, there was another important point, which was the development of potential. After reaching the completion of the Qi and Blood realm, Chen Zong could feel the subtlety of his body. In particular, he cultivated the body forging skill, which had copper skin and reinforced steel bones. Although he hadn't mastered the mixed yuan body yet, he cultivated the body forging skill every day and was tempered by the aura of the mixed yuan pearl, which made his body more condensed than before. The primitive inner strength refined from such a body was incomparably pure. However, if the cultivation method wasn't good enough, it could only be passively transformed, and could not be actively developed. The Thunderclap sword force was barely capable of such an ability, which made Chen Zong's cultivation speed faster. If he didn't lose the 5th level, it would be much faster. Sheathing his sword, Chen Zong moved forward again. Now, I'm qualified to kill a lower LV4 demonic beast, Chen Zong thought to himself. Bai Yuxiao's strength was definitely stronger than most lower LV4 demonic beasts. At this moment, in another part of the Western Wasteland, a group of martial artists emitting ferocious auras appeared one after another. Remember, most of the martial artists entering the Western Wasteland this time are the younger generation of the major forces. There are many geniuses among them. If you can catch them alive, do so. If you can't, kill them. Try to eliminate their power as much as possible. The leader said in a cold voice, like a chilly wind. His narrowed eyes were as cold as a blade. Yes. Killing geniuses must be very satisfying. My big blade has been hungry for a long time. Also, some of them are our people. Don't kill them by mistake. Begin the operation. As soon as the leader finished speaking, the Black Demon Sect's training realm martial artists immediately entered the Western Wasteland. Almost all the forces had people from the Black Demon Sect hiding in them. Naturally, the Black Demon Sect would know about such an operation and make arrangements. If the Black Demon Sect wanted to rise again, they would have to fight with all the forces. Weakening the forces of all the forces as much as possible was equivalent to strengthening themselves. If they could catch some geniuses alive and bring them to the Black Demon Sect's stronghold in the 100 Beasts Mountain and force them to consume the demonic beast blood essence, then the Black Demon Sect would have more geniuses, further strengthening the Black Demon Sect. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. Every day, Chen Zong would encounter many monstrous beasts. Some of them were solitary monstrous beasts, while others were in packs. The most he had ever encountered was a group of over 30 level 3 upper-tier monstrous beasts. This number was enough to threaten a martial artist in the middle stage of the Qi training realm. Ordinary martial artists in the 4th transition of the Qi training realm would have to run as far away as possible, or else they would be surrounded and killed. Even a 5th cycle training realm martial artist would not be willing to fight to the death. With 2 swords in his hands, Chen Zong used the 8 directions 4 extremities steps to the extreme. He kept moving, trying not to be surrounded by the demonic beasts, and using this method, he kept killing the demonic beasts. Even so, Chernzong had exhausted all of his inner strength before he was able to kill all 30 over demonic beasts. Even so, Chernzong was still injured. However, his self-healing ability was strong and he quickly recovered, leaving only a few small scars. After continuous battles, his inner strength would be used up almost every day, and then he would recover. Every time he recovered, his inner strength would improve a little. The inner strength refined by the leakless body was endless, like a small stream. My cultivation has finally reached the limit. I should take this opportunity to break through. After looking around, Chernzong did not see any human or demonic beast. He sat down cross-legged and started to use the 4th level of the Thunderclap sword force. His inner strength was as sharp as a sword, and it seemed to carry the tyrannical power of thunder as it wandered freely in his body. He used all his strength to control the Thunderclap sword force. As it wandered, he squeezed out more inner strength from the leakless body, and then transformed it to strengthen the Thunderclap sword force. Again and again, the Thunderclap sword force increased. At this moment, a figure flew over from afar. It was so fast that it gave people the feeling of a leopard running in the wilderness. It was very vigorous and agile. Someone's here. That person's sharp eyes were filled with a wild nature as he stared at Chernzong. Soon after, he grinned, revealing his white teeth that were suffused with a cold light. He looked very frightening. Kill him first. This person was a martial artist from the Black Demon sect. His cultivation was as high as the 4th level of the Qi refining realm. There were 360 envoys in the Black Demon sect. They were the best in the Qi refining realm. For example, Bloodbat Envoy and Green Ape Envoy that Chernzong had met before were the best in the 3rd and 4th level of the Qi refining realm. There were rules for the 360 envoys in the Black Demon sect. For example, the number of envoys in the 1st level of the Qi refining realm, the number of envoys in the 2nd level, and the number of envoys in the 3rd level of the Qi refining realm. Only those who were strong enough could take up the position. They could enjoy more resources and a higher status. This could be considered as a kind of training principle. Otherwise, they would only need to choose from those with the highest cultivation and strength. Another point was that as time passed, the cultivation of the Black Demon sect's martial artists was also improving. The Black Demon sect's martial artist, who possessed the bloodline of the demonic leopard, quickly approached Chernzong. A terrifying and tyrannical aura swept over. His killing intent stimulated Chernzong's skin, causing the pores on his skin to open wide. It was as if a cold current was flowing down his spine. Under the stimulation of the outside world, the speed of the Thunderclap sword force increased dramatically. His cultivation also broke through in an instant, reaching the peak of the 3rd level of the Qi refining realm. For Chernzong, every increase in his cultivation was an increase in his strength. It was obvious that this was one of the benefits of having a solid foundation. As Chernzong opened his eyes, an extremely sharp light shot out like an unsheathed sword. It pierced straight into the eyes of the Black Demon sect martial artist, causing him to unconsciously narrow his eyes and find it difficult to look straight at him. But at the same time, Chernzong's instant breakthrough also caused him to feel a slight fluctuation in his aura. The peak of the 3rd level of the Qi refining realm. The difference between the early stage of the Qi refining realm and the middle stage was very obvious. Even though the opponent's gaze was very sharp, it was not enough to be used as evidence. He stretched out his claws, which were like the claws of a cheetah, wanting to tear apart space. He fiercely grabbed at Chernzong, wanting to tear Chernzong into pieces. The Black Demon sect's martial artist could already see the beautiful scene of flesh and blood flying everywhere under his claws. Chapter 185. With a slight shake of his arm, the blood on the sword condensed into a drop and shot out a few meters away. With a bang, it broke open the ground. The black demon sect fourth cycle realm martial artist's eyes widened. He covered his chest with both hands and fell to the ground with a face full of unwillingness and fear. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that with his fourth transformation stage cultivation base, even if he was only at the initial stage of the fourth transformation stage, with his tyrannical physique, he was not inferior to an ordinary middle stage of the fourth transformation stage human. Yet, he could not even block a single strike from his opponent. Of course, there was some contempt in his heart, but more of it was due to his opponent's strength. What he did not know was that when Chen Zong's cultivation was still at the late stage of the third transformation of the gene training realm, he was able to fight Bai Yuxiao to a draw. Bai Yuxiao's cultivation was at the late stage of the fourth transformation of the gene training realm, and he was considered a genius, the kind that could challenge those of a higher level. Now that Chen Zong had broken through to the third cycle realm, his strength had increased again. It would not be difficult to kill him with one strike. Unfortunately, other than finding a few low-grade rejuvenation pills, there was no other harvest. Even Black Demon sect martial artists have appeared. The situation is even more complicated. Chen Zong thought to himself. Previously, Demon Sword Star and Fei Yuanji winked at him. It seemed that this was what they meant. However, they did not know that he did not merge with the bloodline of a demon beast. Instead, he borrowed the will of an ancient demon beast to cultivate to the peak of the blood chi realm. His blood chi was pure and flawless. Speaking of which, Black Demon sect martial artists could sense each other's aura. North of the western wasteland, there was a small protruding hill about 30 meters high. The hill was barren, and not even a blade of grass grew. Strangely, there was a 4-meter-tall tree at the top of the hill. The tree was very strange. It had no leaves and its branches were dark red as if they were made of metal. The branches were coiled together and gradually spread upwards like a blooming flower. On the tree trunk there were 9 egg-sized fruits that looked like metal. However, 6 of them were red and were turning dark red. 3 of them were green. At the bottom of the hill there were 3 groups of people. Their eyes were fixed on the 6 dark red fruit. Their breathing was slightly hurried, but no one took the initiative to pick them. It is indeed a minor breakthrough fruit. Is it the kind of divine fruit that claims to allow one to break through from the initial stage of the training force realm to the middle stage of the training force realm without any side effects, and 2 to break through from the middle stage of the training force realm to the late stage of the training force realm without any side effects? That's right. It's that divine fruit. The eyes of the 3 groups of people lit up. They were all waiting for the 6 small breakthrough fruits to ripen. As for the other 3, it would take a few more days for them to ripen. It was possible that even after a month, they still might not ripen. 6 minor realm-breaking fruit. How about the 3 of us take 2 each? One of the Tianwu Academy's 6th Revolution disciples suggested. Before the Giant Blade Academia's disciple could say anything, the people from the Genius Training Camp were already sneering. Split equally? What qualifications do you have? We want 4 and you can split the other 2. A 6th Transition Gene Training Realm Warrior from the Genius Training Camp sneered. Lu Qingyu, your appetite is too big. Aren't you afraid of being stuffed to death? The 6th Transition Gene Training Realm Warrior from the Giant Blade Academia, Yang Xuanguang, said coldly. His aura was overbearing, and the long-handled broadsword in his hand was even more shocking. Lu Qingyu, don't be too arrogant. The 6th Transition Gene Training Realm disciple from the Tianwu Academy, Yuwen Tang, also had a cold expression. Coincidentally, each of the 3 groups had a 6th Transition Gene Training Realm Warrior, 2 5th Transition Gene Training Realm Warriors, and the other 3 3rd Transition Gene Training Realm Warriors. Moreover, they were all very strong geniuses. For example, one of the 10 warriors of the Tianwu Academy, one of the 9 treasured blades of the Giant Blade Academia, and one of the 3 absolute warriors of the Genius Training Camp. No matter who it was, the minor realm-breaking fruits were very attractive to them. The attraction of a breakthrough without any side effects was unparalleled. One had to know that breaking through from the initial stage to the middle stage, and from the middle stage to the late stage, was not easy. Even the top geniuses needed to spend enough time to settle down. 1 or 2 minor realm-breaking fruits were enough to erase that time. Breaking through without any side effects would give one more time to cultivate. When martial artists cultivated, especially geniuses, what they fought for was time. They fought for time with others, and they fought for time with themselves. Wang Feilong of the 10 warriors, Nan Lijie of the 9 treasured blades, and Dao Ju of the 3 absolute warriors all had burning eyes. They only needed 1 minor realm-breaking fruit, and with their accumulation, once they broke through, their cultivation would reach the peak of the 4th transition gene training realm in a very short time. After settling down for a while, breaking through to the 5th transition gene training realm would not be a problem, and they would be ahead of other geniuses of the same level. If that's the case, then I'll kill all of you. Lu Qingyu's face was full of smiles. His tone was calm, as if he was talking about the most normal thing in the world. There was a sense of creepiness in his tone. Too arrogant. Let's work together. Yang Xuanguang, Yuan Tang, and the others were furious. They immediately attacked Lu Qingyu. If they worked together to kill the genius training camp, they would be able to get 6 minor realm-breaking fruit. At least, they would get more than the 2 minor realm-breaking fruit. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Lu Qingyu smiled coldly. He was not afraid of the 2 sides working together. He unsheathed his long blade. The bright blade light was like a crescent moon hanging in the sky. Then, it struck down. The blade cut through the air, but it directly broke the joint force of Yuan Tang and Yang Xuanguang. Yuan Tang's body flashed, and the 6 changes appeared around Lu Qingyu. Both of his hands attacked continuously. His palms slapped, his claws tore, and his fists punched out. Every shadow seemed to be real, and every attack contained a terrifying power. Yang Xuanguang waved his long blade. The blade light was dazzling, like a rushing river. It whistled with a shocking momentum, and fiercely chopped down on Lu Qingyu's head. When the 3 in the lead attacked, the others followed suit. The fruit on the minor realm-breaking tree gradually ripened. At this time, a figure came from afar. It seemed to be riding the wind, and the figure was light and fast. Even from a distance, the sharp eyes could see the 2 sides fighting. Yes, the disciples of Tianwu Academy and Giant Blade Academy were working together to deal with the geniuses of the training camp. That's Dao Ju. Chen Zong's eyes fell on one of them. He had a long blade in his hand, and it revealed an incomparable sharpness. Every blade emitted a dazzling light, as if every blade could cut through everything. It was incomparable. Wang Feilong, one of the 10 warriors, and Nan Lijie, one of the 9 treasured blades, worked together, but they could only fight to a draw. It was undeniable that Wang Feilong and Nan Lijie were very strong. They were not inferior to the 7 sword stars of the True Sword Academy. However, Dao Ju, one of the 3 absolutes of the genius training camp, could fight 1 against 2. He was even gradually gaining the upper hand. This was enough to show how strong the geniuses of the training camp were. The battle was very intense. It was basically 1 against 2. Chen Zong watched carefully, and habitually simulated how he would fight if he were their opponent. Out of the corner of his eye, Chen Zong caught a glimpse of a dark red color. He immediately looked over. Dark red color, like metal. That's... Chen Zong's pupils contracted involuntarily. Minor realm-breaking fruit. Involuntarily, Chen Zong's breathing quickened. His cultivation had reached the peak of the 3rd cycle of the force-refining realm, but it was only the beginning. He still needed some time to consolidate and reach the true limit. He needed to slowly accumulate and then seek a breakthrough. Only then would he be able to advance by leaps and bounds when he reached the 4th cycle of the Force Refining Realm. He could even break through to the 5th cycle of the Force Refining Realm in a short period of time. This was what every genius did. Of course, it was another matter if they were not geniuses. They were already extremely lucky to be able to break through to the 4th cycle of the Force Refining Realm. How could they ask for anything else? According to Chen Zong's own estimation, he would need to spend at least half a year or more to consolidate his cultivation at the peak of the 3rd cycle of the Force Refining Realm before seeking a breakthrough. Time was very important to Chen Zong, especially now that he was surrounded by strong enemies. However, if he took the risk to break through to the 4th cycle of the Force Refining Realm, he would have to spend a lot of time consolidating his cultivation. If he wanted to advance further, it would be even more difficult. Now, as long as he could get his hands on a small breakthrough fruit, everything would be fine. After consuming it, his cultivation would reach the maximum level of consolidation. Then, he would be able to advance by leaps and bounds in a short period of time. I must get it, Chen Zong said to himself with a firm tone. There were 6 small breakthrough fruits that were about to ripen. It would be best if he could get all of them. However, Chen Zong did not dare to hope for too much. One would be enough. With a firm and sharp gaze, Chen Zong burst out at full speed. He turned into a gust of wind and sprinted towards the hill. His cultivation was at the peak of the 3rd cycle of the Force Refining Realm. However, in terms of speed, he was not inferior to a 4th cycle of the Force Refining Realm. In fact, he was even slightly faster. Not long after, Chen Zong went around it and rushed up the hill from the other side, approaching the small breakthrough tree. Who is it? Damn it. Kill him. The people who were fighting fiercely also noticed Chen Zong, the unexpected guest. Their expressions changed drastically. They were extremely angry and murderous. They gave up on their opponents and rushed towards Chen Zong one after another. The 3/6 cycle of the Force Refining Realm cultivators were the fastest. However, Chen Zong had already rushed to the small breakthrough tree and stared at the 6 small breakthrough fruits on it. Faster. Chen Zong was a little anxious. He was no match for the 6th cycle of the Force Refining Realm cultivators. Once they rushed up to him, he could only turn around and leave. Finally, the 6 small breakthrough fruits turned dark red and ripened. Chen Zong leaped over and unsheathed his sword. The sword flashed like a meteor and cut off the roots of the 6 small breakthrough fruit. He used his strength cleverly, and the 5 small breakthrough fruits quickly flew towards the 3/6 cycle of the Force Refining Realm cultivators. He reached out and grabbed the 6th small breakthrough fruit in his hand. Without hesitation, he turned around and used all his strength to perform the wind and water tread and flew away. Mine. Lu Qingyu swept with one hand, trying to catch all 5 small breakthrough fruit. The other hand chopped with the long saber, trying to force Yuan Tang and Yang Xuanguang to retreat. Go away. Yang Xuanguang waved his saber, creating a terrifying whirlwind of saber light. Yuan Tang did not say a word. He clenched his hands into fists and punched out instantly. His fists were fierce and violent, like a flood breaking through a dam. In the face of 5 minor breakthrough fruits, all thoughts of joining forces were thrown to the back of their minds. As for Chen Zong, they didn't care. They couldn't give up on the 5 minor breakthrough fruits here just because of Chen Zong's minor breakthrough fruit. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.